two docket items. The docket items are 411-22, the request for amendment to Chapter 21, Article 3, trees to extend tree protection and update permits, and item 412-22, a request for review and amendments to Chapter 21, Article 3, Division 3. Collectively, we refer to these both as the tree ordinance. So we will get into it. Let me just say that the intention. Oh, I noticed we've been joined by Councillor Lyle Baker from Ward 7, member of the committee. Good evening, Councillor Baker. The plan tonight is to try to resolve any unresolved questions. So a number of folks submitted questions that they would like the committee to revisit or visit for the first time. Thank you for sending those ahead of time. Anything else that comes up, of course, during the course of the evening continues to be in order. This effort to get the questions ahead of time was not to exclude anything from coming up tonight, but rather to give us a sense of the things that we need to work through. In addition, when we get to the end, hopefully we get to the end of all these questions, it's my hope and expectation that we will then hold the item tonight. The law department has requested an opportunity to go through the ordinance to make sure that the drafting is all accurate, that it reflects the will of the committee, and that the ordinance is structured appropriately. I think that's a very reasonable request. I think recently we've had some circumstances where the full council was looking at an ordinance that the committee hadn't necessarily reviewed the full language of. So I think in an effort to make sure that we avoid that from happening again, it's a reasonable request. I hope the committee would agree. And again, my hope would be that at the end of our evening tonight, we hold the item, one more meeting at least, to give the law department the opportunity to conduct that review. Anyone have any questions before we get to Councillor Humphrey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to check before we were diving into straw votes and stuff.
Yep.
I believe my recollection is that we had settled on, or at least straw vote purposes, had previously settled on a fee schedule, which was not any of the original proposals. But when I looked in the packet, I wasn't sure if I saw that clearly identified.
I will turn to Jacqueline to see if my recollection is incorrect on this. I believe what we settled on in terms of the ordinance was a requirement that the tree warden update the fee schedule annually, and that would be the language that we put in the ordinance.
Right.
We also, I think, had a desire to see what that fee schedule might look like from the tree warden, but we decided that it wasn't necessarily the purview of the council or this committee to review or approve, I should say, that fee schedule.
Well, the only reason I'm asking is just because I have a feeling that some of how people are going to vote on certain straw votes that were outlined in the packet is dependent probably on the ballpark dollar figures and methodology there. Mr. Welch, was I remembering correctly that it was the pink column that we had settled on as a committee in previous analysis? That's the combined 30-year environmental value / replacement cost?
Yes, I think that was the one that at the time we felt was more comfortable with, I should say.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, then I would just note for the committee and anybody watching that when we're discussing these other straw votes, that's the assumption that we're working off of mentally in terms of the approximate fees we're talking about associated with these proposals. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to also double check the accuracy of what I said. Either Mr. Welch, Jacqueline, are we in agreement that we sort of didn't establish that was in fact the fee schedule? Again, I think what Councillor Humphreys laid out is helpful in terms of the direction where we all think this is headed, as much as we can be prescriptive, which is not, at least our desire is not to be overly prescriptive. But am I correct about that at least in terms of the approval of the committee and what's in the ordinance just requires the tree warden to come up with the fee schedule, and that we had put language in asking that fee schedule to include the environmental impact?
That's my recollection.
That is correct.
Okay, Councillor Humphrey, that you agree with that, right?
Yes, I just, there were a lot of columns floating around out there and it wasn't clearly stated in the packet. So I wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about that. Thank you.
Yep, I think you and I are sort of focused on different components of this, but we don't disagree with each other on any of them. Okay, great. Okay, then my desire, as we have done, barring anyone else telling me that it doesn't make sense, would be to sort of go through the proposals in the ordinance, in the order of the ordinance. So, we'll start with section 2181, see what questions there are, things that folks want to revisit. I have my handy dandy sheet of things that people have raised. We will automatically raise those issues, but again, if there are things that other folks want to raise, please do so. Okay. So in 2181, I know Councilor Wright, you wanted to revisit the size at which, I think it's the definition of protected tree, really. And I think you wanted to revisit perhaps that definition. I think we as a committee settled on 6 inches or larger, but you tell me, Councilor Wright. You're on mute, Councilor Wright.
Okay, if we settled on the 6 inches, then that's fine, but I didn't think we did. I thought it was 40 inches, no?
Well, again, I may be looking at the wrong thing. I thought you were talking about the definition of protected tree, and we said any tree having a diameter, I think it was 8 inches. And I think we didn't jive all the language in our draft, but I think we looked at 6 inches. But the committee can revisit what that minimum threshold is. And
so one of the things in Senator Cream's bill is to get state funding for tree replacement. In her bill, she said 6 inches.
Right. Jacqueline, do you want to double check it? Or actually, I mean, why don't we just, the committee can decide right now, because it looks like.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Sorry, Councilor.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So I think that, Mr. Welch, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that for the purposes of definition, protection in that sense and in that section means that someone would still have to file the paperwork and documentation, and that doesn't address anything about waiver exemptions or anything like that. That's covered under other sections, but that we were proposing to reduce the minimum threshold for documentation from 8 inches to 6 inches. So I think we had already decided that, right?
Yes, that's my understanding. Yes, we're going from 8 to 6. Any tree 6 inches in diameter or larger fits the definition on private property, fits the definition of a protected tree.
All right, thank you.
Replacement is a separate discussion.
Right. I personally think that's super important, that like all the rest of this hinges on documentation and paperwork being filed, whether or not there are any, penalties, fees, or anything like that is a separate thing. Once we have the ability to track this, that's going to already enable us to do a lot better job protecting the private trees in the city. And it's just a question, as the other upcoming straw votes will indicate, about what sort of things happen beyond that initial step. Thank you.
So I think it's unanimous among the committee, but does anyone object to the definition of protected tree being 6 inches or larger? Any objections to that? Okay. Jacqueline, I would note, I think the language, at least the language I'm looking at, still has the word 8, but the numeral 6. So.
Yes, that's the language I have as well.
Okay. So we'll just correct that, and then Jonah will correct it again. He takes a swing at it. Jonah, does the law department know the difference between the numeral 6 and the number 8 written out? Yes.
I did go to law school because I was bad at math, so let's hope.
Great. Okay. If you need help, I'm comfortable with it, so reach out to me. All right. Anything else in 2181? Anything else in the definitions that anyone is concerned about or wants to raise? Okay. In 2182, I think we have a number of proposed amendments / issues to raise. So the first one I have is from Councilor Wright. It was to increase the number of privately owned lots covered under the ordinance. She says to do so by not exempting single and 2-family lots with no planned construction in the next 24 months. So Councilor Wright, I'm happy to let you speak to this, but I think folks know that the overarching theme of this is that private lots with large trees are covered, and single and 2-family lots are exempted only if there is no planned construction in the next 24 months. If I've hopefully said that correctly. Councilor Wright?
So there's a couple things my concerns here. So I want to make sure that 1 and 2 family lots are not exempted because they make up of 80% of the residential property and 53% of all the land in Newton, which is quite a bit. I think the whole idea, if there's no planned construction, 2 years and that, who's really going to be keeping track of this? I don't think Mr. Welch has the staff to be running around and doing all of that. And then after 2 years and they've sold it, does the future owners that they sold within that time frame, now they owe the money and not the person who actually cut down the trees? There's just a lot of issues with that. And I think we should also do an exemption to protect the low income and fixed income property owners by income, which Cambridge does.
Okay, so can we try to parse that into a specific proposal or one at a time? You raised like 4 different issues.
Yeah. So this whole thing, so the 2 years, can you recite exactly how that goes for the 2-year look back?
Okay, so right now, single and 2 family lots are exempt so long as there is no construction planned for the next 24 months.
And I don't think that they should be exempt.
So your first proposal is to eliminate that exemption, and then you'll talk about what, if anything, you want to exempt. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd like to exempt that, but then
Okay. You'd like to remove that exemption.
except for low income and fixed income property owners.
Okay,
They could get exempted.
So you want to replace the single and 2 family where no construction is planned for 24 months. You want to replace that with an exemption only for low income owners,
Yeah,
low income homeowners.
yes.
Okay. President Albright.
Oh gosh. I'm dealing with a dog who's trying to
I
dig
can
up.
come back to you. Do you want me to come back to you?
Yes, please.
Sure. Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I understood the proposal that we had come up with previously, it's not just planned construction. It is construction or not, right? Mr. Welch had indicated that these would go into the is it the new Gov system? Is that how we do the permitting now, right? And so if the property then had construction within that look back period, then it would trigger the removal of the exemption waiver that had been granted. So someone can get a waiver for, qualifying for other reasons, but then if they subsequently or the next owner has construction within that look back period, that would be flagged automatically in the computer system and the waiver would be rescinded, essentially, as I understood the proposal. And in fact, to your other question that you had raised both verbally and in the document, Councilor Wright, to me, it does make sense that the next property owner, if it changed hands, would be responsible, because we don't want to have somebody clear cutting a property in preparation for handing it off to a developer, and then not having the developer have any, payments associated with that. So I think it is quite easy to track this and basically make sure that the rule is being followed here. That's why the documentation part is so important. Even if there's an exemption, you still have to file the paperwork in order to qualify for that exemption so that it can potentially be rescinded later. Is my understanding correct from the point of view of staff and the chair?
Yes, that's correct. I think talking about enforcement, because we're now getting into the enforcement issue, is relevant for this discussion only if you think it is enforceable or unenforceable. But at the moment, we're just trying to talk about whether that's the exemption. But the point is well taken about that. That's how it is enforced. But if we want to discuss enforcement, let's do that later, because that's a separate issue.
So can I say something on that? I was looking at more as let's say someone clear cut their lot And then, then they sell it to a developer and then the developer will pay. But let's say they clear cut their lot, they were going to do something, and then they sell it to a private party, a family, and they don't really know about what was on the lot before. They're buying the house as is, and now they're going to get, and they weren't going to plan for construction. So they'll get stuck with all these fees because it hasn't been done in those 2 years. So I don't know if with the new gov, if we can do it at a house sale or something. I don't know how that would work.
Okay. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you clarify what construction means actually? Because what if a family decides to cut a tree in the front yard and then a year later decides to build a back porch? Does that trigger the fees?
Yeah, we could certainly, inquire with, what the read is of either, staff or law department. The way I read the current exemption, it doesn't even draw a connection between the tree and the planned construction. It simply says where no construction is planned.
So construction could mean building a raised garden or a shed or...
Chair, could I jump in on this quickly?
Sure, go ahead, Jonah.
My read of the ordinance, and this is an area we'd want to clean up, is the term construction there probably refers back to the exterior work permit definition. And so I would view construction meaning anything that would require an exterior work permit. I don't know, Mark, if you have a different view of it under the current ordinance, because the same question exists now.
Yeah, no, exactly how you have explained it, Jonah. That's how we do it now, and that's how we interpret this to mean the same thing.
Okay, thank you. So can we have that in the ordinance to clarify what?
But I'm sorry, Councilor Greenberg, because I think your question is still relevant, which is, does there have to be a nexus between the tree that's removed and the content of the exterior work permit? In other words, if a tree is removed in the front yard and the exterior work is all in the backyard,
right,
there could be no nexus there. Is that right, Jonah? Or
that's right. There does not need to be a nexus, but the exterior work permit definition does require a certain level of exterior work. It wouldn't just be every small project. It would be work that would require a building permit, to put it simply.
Councilor Greenberg, does that answer your question? I thought your question was about what if a tree is removed that's unrelated to construction that occurs.
Right, that was my question. Thank you. But could it be clarified, meaning the exterior work permit could be put in the ordinance so folks understand what it means by construction?
Are you saying can we clarify to make sure that there is a nexus between the tree removal and the exterior work permit?
No, that the word construction means exterior work permit.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, possibly in the drafting.
Okay.
Yeah. Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an item on here too in section 2182. And it's on, and it relates to what we're talking about because I want to extend it from 2 years to 3 years. And the other thing is I'm getting a little lost now because I thought what I'm trying to do is differentiate between a existing homeowner, meaning 3 years or more, and an LLC that comes in, and specifically what I always think about is tear downs and clear cutting. So what I'm saying, what I'm trying to look at this saying is that if you buy a lot, you buy my house, which they would tear down and tear it down, or you're going to automatically have to pay for the trees that you take down, to put it in simple terms. But what also happens on the tear downs themselves, and this is what I'm trying to alleviate, is ringers move into houses when at one time we had people that wouldn't sell to, and a young couple would come in and say, oh, we're not tearing it down this, but they were actually ringers for a developer. So, I mean, I want to make it 3 years. And then I don't want to really penalize a homeowner that much that wants to put an addition on and there may be a tree in the way. Hopefully it wouldn't be an old growth tree, but that's what I'm trying to do with this.
Okay, well, I think the first order of business, we have to decide if we want to replace the language with Councilor Wright's low-income homeowner language. Once we decide that, then we can move on to other possible changes to the exemption language, like 36 months if Councilor Wright's amendment doesn't pass. Make sense, Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to do the same thing pretty much. I just want it longer, but I want to not have, if a homeowner lands there, it's 3 years and then they can decide what they're going to do with the house and the lot and everything else. I just want to assure that they're really the homeowner and plan to be the homeowner. And then the clock starts again if they sell.
Gotcha. President Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for forbearing with my puppy problem. So that while it's true that single and two-family houses are the predominantly what we have in Newton, I think our biggest problem is from tear downs, of which there are about 100 a year. So I think we don't need to focus, for me, we don't need to focus on all the single and two-family homes. We need to focus on the issue of the tear downs. And an issue just got raised that I wasn't sure about before. If there's no nexus between the construction permit and the tear down of the tree, the taking down of the tree 2 years prior or a year and a half prior, is there still a reason? Do we still force the people to pay for the taking down of the tree? If the construction is on the left side and the tree was on the right side, do they still have to pay for the taking down of the tree?
For the current language, it seems like they would.
Okay, that makes no sense to me at all. There has to be a nexus between the taking down of the tree and the construction. Otherwise, this language makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I would opt for some language that makes a nexus between them.
Yeah.
And this is a question about the OpenGov system. Once you file for a building permit, it goes into OpenGov. Will the tree permits also go into OpenGov?
Yes, we will use the OpenGov system to issue tree permits. As it stands currently, the tree permit, a copy of the tree permit is part of the building permit application in OpenGov.
Okay, so everything in OpenGov is address based, 1075 Commonwealth Avenue, it's all address based. So if somebody takes out a permit, for a tear down of a tree, I would assume that OpenGov can also give you a ding if there's a construction project within 2 years. And if it can't do that now, I'm sure it could do that because software can be set to do that.
So it may give a notification, which is fine, but the way we do it currently and as proposed, if someone comes to us for a tree permit, just to cut a tree down, we'll issue the tree permit, and then replacement requirements are based on all the other factors that we've talked about. If they're an exempt situation that we've been talking about, we'll issue a permit within NewGov for that tree removal.
Yes.
If at some point in 24 months or any time period that a building permit is filed, we will see that because I'm a sign off for the building permit. Building permits aren't issued unless there's a tree permit issued. So that's when we capture it. When I do the sign off, essentially, whether it's a tree permit in hand or directly asking me to sign off, I sign off on all exterior construction permits that Inspectional Services issues.
Okay, so I don't worry about keeping track of the 2 years or what if it ends up being 3 years, as Councilor Ryan is interested in. I think OpenGov can handle that. I don't know, do we need to find out if the committee also is worried about this nexus, there not being a nexus in the current language
Yeah, I
between,
think we're gonna look, I have it on my list. We're gonna look
Okay.
to make sure that we deal with the nexus issue.
Oh,
I'm trying
okay.
to, make sure we go sort of one issue at a time.
okay,
And Councilor Wright has a proposal on the floor to eliminate the single and two family exemption and replace that with her proposal is to eliminate single and two family where no construction is planned and replace it with single and two family homes owned by low income individuals.
okay, but doesn't it say low income and fixed income? I remember reading it, but I don't, I think it says low income and fixed income.
It does say that, but I'm open to either just low income or low income and fixed. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that make a lot of money on fixed incomes.
Okay, yeah,
Some that
low
don't
income.
make much and some, yeah, I think you just get rid of
Just
the
low income.
Yeah, so I'm interested in the low income issue, but I really think we need to fix this nexus issue as well. And I'm not worried about OpenGov handling the issue of the 2 years or the 3 years, whatever it ended up being. Okay.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. One is, it's related to the enforcement, but I assume NewGov, someone was asking about transfer of the property. Normally, when you get buy a house and get a title certificate, there's a municipal lien certificate. Seems to me that there's some opportunity as part of the city record keeping to include some reference to the tree ordinance if that applies in that context. So that may be something the administration wants to think about as part of the enforcement process. But I'm uneasy about going to the full, taking all of the properties in the city that are single and two family and making them except for specific income qualifications, because that, remember, the whole ordinance here is not preserving any trees. It's just saying how much you pay to take a tree down. And I think the disincentive we wanted to get at was tear down. So I think a demolition permit or other triggers that we might want to think about. But I thought we've heard concerns that expanding just the expense of tree removal to all properties in the city is making it a very difficult situation for a number of property owners. And that I'm sympathetic to the idea of protecting against the construction related tree removals, but I'm not yet ready to go to the point of requiring everybody. If we leave the current language in place, I mean the current proposal in place, and then the question of low income is a moot issue, as I understand it. But that's why I'm not prepared to support the low income exemption, because I'm not prepared to support just taking out and making everyone required to do this. I'm interested in the construction side, but not the other expanding it that wide yet. I'm open to persuasion, but I haven't heard exactly why. Because again,
Councilor Wright. Oh,
single
sorry.
tree, it says the trees have to be paid for. That's one of the real important points about this ordinance. So easy to talk about saving the tree, and we're not necessarily saving any trees. We're just asking people to pay the cost when they come down. Now, there may be a legitimate public purpose in that independently. I understand that, but I just want to leave people with a misapprehension that we're stopping trees from being cut and just costing people more when they do it. So
you all set, Councilor Baker? I'm sorry.
well, I can't support the motion at the current frame, so I think that's the right process. And I may have to leave for a few minutes and then come back.
You're that upset about the motion?
Say again?
You're that upset about the motion that you're gonna have to leave for a few minutes?
No, that's a motion I
okay.
made physically.
Okay.
As opposed to
Just making sure.
procedure.
Councilor Wright.
I want to point out, at least in our neighborhood, over here, property owners are taking down trees, not just tear downs and little forests and things like that. The whole idea is a disincentive for bringing down the trees. I mean, the trees are tearing down the trees are, doing environmental damage to the neighborhoods and your neighbors and the city. Trees are a good thing. We want, people to think twice before they cut down a tree. Do they really need to take down that tree? And I exempting, 1 and 2 family lots, like I said, that's that's over half the city. And, I just feel very strongly not to exempt them. But, we can do, for low income, and we need to define low income. Is it, 100% AMI or 110% AMI or whatever? Yeah, but that's where I feel I'm strongly on that.
I'm not seeing any other hands. I will say that I don't feel overly comfortable. Let me put it that way. That if a homeowner in Newton has a home and wants to put a mudroom on the side of their house, and there's a 6-inch tree there, that we're saying they have to pay more than $3,000 to the city to remove that tree to put a mudroom on their house. I understand the tear down rather than a distinction between the income of the homeowner or a distinction between the duration between when they applied for the tree permit and when construction is happening. I would rather see a distinction in the size or the amount of work that's being done, because again, I'm all on board with, disincentivizing a tear down that cuts down a whole bunch of trees and building it, or at least compensating for that. But I think it's quite a big burden that we're putting on single and two family homeowners who are looking to improve their property, and could be the difference between their ability to improve their property and not. So that's my discomfort with this exemption and the way it's crafted, especially with the tree schedule that we've seen. So I'm gonna vote no as well, and then try and tackle with another one. Councilor Ryan.
Okay, what you just said is what basically I agree with, and what I've been saying through this whole process is there's a difference between a homeowner that wants to put, as you put it, a mudroom or a 1 or 2 room addition on, and an LLC coming in and tearing down a house and cutting down every tree on the lot. I'm not happy. I'm just not comfortable with a lot of what we're doing on this. I just think that's why I wanted the 3 years. And then I would want I want it to be different for an actual homeowner who's trying to bring maybe a relative in and has to add a room or whatever. And I don't think they should be paying thousands and thousands of dollars for that one tree, as opposed to the trees I see cut down all the time with these tear downs that don't have to be, but it just seems to be a convenience to get heavy equipment in, or the leaves might drop on the new roof or whatever. I mean, it's really pretty ridiculous. It's to that point. So I want to hopefully, I know we're saying, oh, we thought we were all done today, but I don't know. I still want to make the difference in what I just said about who we're fining or who we're charging. And that, as Council Wright said, I want people to think before they take a tree down or a group of trees. I want them to have to say, do I really need to do this? Okay, I'm going to do it because my mother's moving here from Ireland, and she's we're going to build her a room and another room maybe. But that's a difference for me. It always will be. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan, I would encourage, actually, I'd love to hear maybe Mr. Welch or Mr. Yo, I don't know, the existing ordinance, the existing language in the ordinance about the extension of exempted lot status for 18 months and continuously occupied. Was that directed at a homeowner who, as Councilor Ryan put it, sort of, truly and genuinely owns the lot and is intending to stay there? Was that the genesis of the existing language?
Yes, that was the genesis of the existing language. I think where we encounter a little bit of I think an unintended consequence of that has been more times than not when someone files for that extension of exempt lot status. So it essentially allows somebody who owns a home to do this work, add a mudroom, for example, and are not required to replace it. what we've found though is that more times than not, the people applying for that have bought the home with the intention of tearing the home down. They're the owner, not the LLC, but they have that builder or developer has prearranged that they buy the house, the future homeowner, and then file for the extension of exempt lot status. So it doesn't feel like it keeps with the spirit of the intent was if you're tearing down a home and cutting all the trees down, then you should be replacing and not using that extension of exempt lot status. That's the reason why under our proposed changes, we just required replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Councilor Ryan?
I'm good.
You all
Thank
set?
you. Yeah.
Okay. I see next Councilor Noel, and Councilor Noel, I don't know if I mentioned that you are here. If I didn't, I apologize. But Councilor Noel, Vice Chair of the committee, is here, has joined us,
Thank you.
and she's coming in.
Thank you. I'm coming in hot. So in theory, I agree with Councilor Ryan and Councilor Krinsman. But what I struggle with is that we're saying that certain people can cut down trees and it's okay, and other people can't. And we're placing a value on who is worthy. Like if you're trying to house your parents in an accessory apartment, then we have empathy for you. But if you're a big bad developer who's going to plow through a yard, then you're not welcome here. And I think that's the vilification of developers is a trope that I'm really tired of. Either we value trees or we don't. And I don't know how we legislate that nuance. And I say that with all the empathy in the world for someone who's trying to house their parents or someone who needs a mudroom, but it's placing a value judgment on a developer, which is just, I mean, we need developers to build houses. I can't build a house. Not sure anybody on this call knows how to build a house. So why do we get to place a value on a developer? Either we value trees or we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Noel. It's a fair point. Let me say that in my mind, it wasn't a distinction between a distinction of the value on the tree or not. In my mind, it was sort of the scale of the project and whether the additional cost of removing the trees is negligible is going to be a go or no go decision on someone who's just looking to improve their property. If it's someone who's tearing down a home and rebuilding it, I think factoring in the costs of tree clearing or whatever they're doing is a justifiable expense to impose on them, especially for probably the magnitude of the work that they're doing and the damage that they're causing. And I distinguish that from smaller projects, which are probably having smaller impact on fewer trees. But that's just in my mind. But I understand what you're saying.
And do you mind if I just ask a follow-up?
No, go for it.
I would want to make sure if we were going to create shades of gray for who's allowed to cut down trees and who we have more empathy for, that we be very mindful and be careful of the workarounds on this.
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Welch was sort of addressing, right? He was saying that we came up with a statute and we're seeing workarounds, and that's one of the reasons why he proposed language that was different than the existing ordinance.
And
all with the same sort of intention of, I think, what Councilor Ryan is getting at, because I think, there's agreement on the point that Councilor Ryan is making. It's just a question of how best to deal with that.
And I'll make one more comment about it. If I am a one-off, I've decided I'm going to flip one house to make some money, and I might live there, I might not live there. I mean, how do we define a developer? Is a house flipper a developer? Okay, that's it.
Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, just a couple of points. None of the proposals before us are preventing anyone from cutting down any trees. That it's just a question of whether or not there's exemptions or not after you file the paperwork, and that there's fees associated with replacement and so forth.
A distinction without difference. If there's a fee, there's a prevention method. If you're charging people to cut down a tree, there's a mechanism in place to prevent the cutting down of a tree.
Well, I mean, unless they pay for it. But the other point is that the way that we had defined it in the draft is not about what type of an entity you are. It's about whether or not the lot is occupied, and obviously whether there's construction happening or not. If you combine those two things together, a non-occupied lot with construction happening, I mean, we know what that is, right? But if it's an occupied lot with construction, different set of rules. And there's also a straw vote coming up in a few lines that would further distinguish there. But anyway, thank you.
You, Councilor Humphrey. Okay, so I think we are at least on to Councilor Wright's proposal, which is to change no construction plan for 24 months with owned by a low income individual. If you are in support of changing the 24-month look back to a requirement that the person be low income to be exempt, you will vote in the affirmative on this, okay? All those in favor of Councilor Wright's proposed amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Heard one. Those opposed? No.
No.
I was an aye.
Councilor Greenberg, you were an aye.
Yes.
Were you on mute when you said aye?
No.
It's harder for me to hear when you're on mute. You sure?
Wait,
All right, I'm going to
Councilor
I'm
Greenberg,
going to credit you with an aye vote. So that was
Yes.
2,
can I just check?
2 to
Sorry.
6, right? Did anyone else want to be an aye on that motion? Yes. Okay.
Can I, Mr. Chair, can I just double check there? Councilor Greenberg, is that
Yeah.
the direction you meant to vote on that one? Because that was not consistent with what you were asking about earlier.
Well, I'm just considering low income families.
Well, okay, that I don't think that was well, never mind. But
It's a fluid process, Counselor Humphrey. It's fluid. We're growing and changing on the scene.
on a minute to minute basis, apparently.
We're growing and
Councilor
changing.
Greenberg heard persuasive arguments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was persuaded. It's excellent. Maybe each vote we can check though, make sure everyone votes the way they want to vote. We can go through each vote.
But Chair, we didn't vote yet on the 3-year
No.
proposal?
No, not yet. Okay, so the next thing we can do one of two things. I've raised, instead of no construction for 24 months, being single and two family lots that are proposing construction of greater than X square feet. I sort of look to others to give me, I think there's de minimis standards. Councilor Baker, isn't there like a de minimis, maybe under 400 square feet, something like that at the moment?
We have in the zoning ordinance for an extension or building without a special permit, even in a non-conforming situation, I think it's 400 square feet. So I think if you wanted to track the zoning ordinance, you could say a project is under 400 square feet. Will be exempt.
Okay, so that would be one way to do it, at least consistent with other components of our ordinance. And then we have a proposal to extend this to keep the current language that the committee had already agreed upon, but extend it to a 36-month look back period. And again, we can get into enforcement down the road. Councilor Baker, go ahead.
So I'd like to just indicate that I'm very sympathetic to Councilor Wright's general objection, which is to get at the tear downs. And so the 36 months is consistent with that. The 400 square feet, I'm not too terribly concerned about, but I think it would give us more leverage to make sure that these properties are, in fact, not being, the trees are not being taken down in a certain circumstance that's undesirable. So I would support the extension and support the 400 square feet.
I'm sorry, I missed a little of what you said, Dan. You would support?
It's in the same, to pick up the nexus that Councilor Wright is, Albright has talked about, it's in the same place. In other words, if you're building on the other side of the house, it wouldn't make any sense to provide an input.
Okay. Mr. Welch, do you know if an exterior work permit is required for under 400 square feet of work?
I don't know the answer to that one. I don't want to guess. So I don't.
Okay. I wonder if Mr. Yo or the law department knows.
Not offhand, I'm looking, but
Okay.
I think my gut would be, yeah. I mean, under 400 square feet is, a small addition to a home. I think it does. I've seen tree permit or building permit with that. I think the
would
shed.
think that it would, and my suggestion was going to be for us to sort of look at the definition of exterior work permit and possibly exempt under 400 square feet from that, and also include within the definition of exterior work a nexus between the exterior work permit and the tree removal. Feels like that might be a place to do it, but I also, Ms. Wilson or Mr. Temple, if you guys have thoughts on that or the best way to do it, I would be interested to hear those. And in the meantime, I'll come to Councilor Wright.
So I'm all about trying to protect trees and have people think twice before cutting down a tree. So I do not support exempting less than 400 square feet. Cutting down a tree is cutting down a tree. Thanks. But I do support going to 36 months. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the clear, concise, and direct comments. That was fantastic. I mean, I disagree with the substance, but the method was fantastic. Aces. Anyone else want to comment on these?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there are two different issues. One is that
right, and we can vote on them separately. But does anyone have a comment on either of them?
Actually, Councilor Wright persuaded me on the 400 square feet. So let's pick up Councilor Humphrey's moving target nominee. Yeah.
So I just lost you on square feet too?
Yeah.
Councilor Wright, you got it. Don't be so effective. Okay.
Growing and changing. That's the whole reason. We're growing and changing.
Like a tree. Okay. So this one, I'm pretty sure that we can do this unanimously. I'm guessing, well, I shouldn't say that. If folks agree with creating a nexus between the exterior work and the removed trees, I can defer to legal on how best to draft that. But I do think, I think it's a fair point to say that there ought to be a nexus between the exterior work permit and the trees that have been removed. Discussion on that, Councilor Humphrey.
Wait, are we not voting on the previous two things first?
After we talk about the need for a nexus, then we'll talk about the 400 square foot exemption, and then we'll talk about the 36 months.
Okay. Regarding the nexus, the concern that I had there is we know that sometimes a tree gets removed because it's more convenient for construction equipment, even if the construction is happening elsewhere on the lot. So while I understand where that is coming from, I would definitely want to see the specifics of the language before I could definitively agree to that. So I would probably abstain on that particular point tonight until I could at least see how that's drafted.
Well, on the bright side, that's exactly what we're talking about doing.
I figured. I'm just pointing that out.
No, I hear you. I'm saying I think, at our next meeting is when you will have that language in front of you and you'll be able to weigh in specifically on that. Okay. At the moment, I think it's mostly principle. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you. I guess it would get complicated when you're trying to assess the distance between the tree being removed and the construction site. So at what distance would it be considered part of the construction site, and which distance? I don't know. I think there should be a nexus, but then I can understand how it would be complicated in deciding where to draw the line. So it's confusing.
Yeah, I'm going to very much defer to legal on this, but the one that's sort of coming up in my mind, Mr. Temple, is the sort of but-for analysis, and like in a tort case, right? If the tree had not been removed but for the construction project, whether it was
I was gonna
to make space for a truck or whatever. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna go simpler and say if the construction that's proposed is within the tree save area of any given tree.
Okay. Yep. Another good way to do it.
That would make the most sense in this conversation. If we were doing it, I agree with Jonah. I would do it that way.
I'm sorry, could you repeat what Jonah said?
So it would only be triggered if the construction that's done in whatever time period you end up with is construction within the tree save area of of any trees on the lot. And Mark can be the one to describe.
Mark, explain that, please.
So the tree save area, as it's proposed, is for every trunk diameter inch, it's 1.5 times the trunk diameter. So if you have a 10-inch diameter tree, then you're talking it must be 15 feet this tree save area would be 15 feet from the trunk of the tree or the canopy of the tree, depending on which one's greater, based on the language we currently have.
Okay. Yeah, that would be better. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that works. I think that's a good idea, Jonah. The only thing I would say, and maybe it's not realistic, but is if someone's doing rear construction and there's a tree in the front yard that they remove to get the trucks back there or something along those lines, wouldn't we want to include that? Even if it's outside the drip line or the tree save area, which I think relates to the drip line. I don't know, just a thought. I'll leave it to you guys because again, I think we can, carefully draft this afterwards. But
Yeah, there's language to get at too that we can think about and bring back to the committee.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely like what you're thinking about. Councilor Wright.
I actually agree with Councilor Humphrey, and I worry about cutting down a tree in the front yard to get that, truck in the back. And it complicates things. So why even have the nexus? I want to try to protect as many trees as we can. I feel like I'm the Lorax out here by myself, but yeah, so I don't agree with the nexus.
Well, I'm going to say that this whole discussion that we've had over 10 times is all about trying to get a stronger ordinance in place. So I don't think that you're on an island by yourself. You may just be feeling differently about certain issues, but at least that's how I feel. And I've actually never seen the Lorax, which is terrible. My kids have chastised me a few times. President Albright.
So as long as, with respect to the nexus, as long as Mr. Temple could write the language so that it took into account Mr. Councilor Humphrey's issue about a tree being removed so the construction trucks could get in there, I'm 100% in favor of it.
Councilor Ryan.
Yeah, I go to originally what I said about the unnecessary tree removals to get equipment in there, so I'd have to agree with this. Yeah, and it's about, taking a look and trying to find another way to preserve the tree. And also, I want to speak 1 second on my motion that if I want to push it back to 36 months.
We're coming up on that.
Huh?
We're going to be taking that up in 2 seconds.
All right, so you want me to wait?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll come to you first. Okay.
Okay.
I think I heard Councilor Wright speak against this. Other than that, why don't we go see if there are any objections? Or actually, we'll just do a straw vote. Same thing. All those in favor of implementing or establishing a nexus between trees that are proposed to be removed and the construction as it's outlined in the exempt lot language. All those in favor of creating that nexus, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Oppose, no.
Okay, so that's 7-1.
I'm abstaining.
Okay. Are there 8 of us? Who are we missing? Did Councilor Baker drop off? I thought I heard him.
No, he's here.
He's here.
Okay. So it's 6-1. Right, Jacqueline? Okay. And in Jonah we trust. Great. And we'll look at that next time. Okay. Next thing, we'll do 36 months and then we'll talk about my 400 square foot exemption. So first, let's go to 36 months. Councilor Ryan, this is essentially speaking to keep the existing language, but extend the look back period from 24 months to 36 months. Have at it.
Yeah, I propose this for the reasons I stated at the beginning, is that, to make sure the people that are in the house and want to do the addition and take down trees are actually the people that own it and are living there. Remember that if we say 3 years, 36 months, it doesn't mean they have to start the paperwork at 36 months. They can't start the construction for 36 months, but they can be working towards that date with getting permits and everything they need and design, so they can be ready at that time. So, it's not that much of a difference, but to who actually owns the house and, who's doing the mudroom, so to speak, or the accessory apartment. That matters to me. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, President Albright.
A question. So if the house changes hands, doesn't the clock start ticking over again? It's if the house is sold within 18 months, let's say the house is sold in 18 months, do they still have to abide by the 24 months or the 36 months, whatever it ends up being?
Yeah, I would want them to abide by the 36 months. The clock starts over again at every sale.
I don't think we have a new clock in this ordinance.
Well, I mean, how could it's not enforced. It's the same thing. You're going back to the same thing that it can be torn down on the first day, and you know, the trees are all cut again, and you know, this is also to help with the tear downs. To help
The way the ordinance currently reads, or the way that we proposed it. 24 months. Again, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I think if a home were sold after 18 months, the new homeowner would have to wait another 6 months until the 24 months had expired
well,
to
that's,
avoid, compensating. But after they waited 6 months, they would be able to construct without having to compensate for the trees that had been removed 2 years earlier.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense to me. And I'm in favor of 2 years, not 3 years. And, you know, so much can happen in people's lives in 2 years, and even more can happen within 3 years. To hold people accountable for changes in their lives in that period of time feels very unreasonable to me. So I would keep it at 24 months.
Thanks, President Albright.
I'm confused now on, are you saying the clock does not start again if someone buys it within that 3-year period that I'm proposing?
I am open to being corrected here, but I don't believe that we have any language, at least not in the tree ordinance, that requires the clock to start again on a change of ownership. There was language in the old exemption that had to do with extension of non-exempt status, but we have removed all that language in favor of a blanket 24-month proposal, I think. Again, Mr. Temple.
No, that is correct.
Okay.
As drafted, we would interpret the ordinance to mean even if it changes ownership in year 1, that new owner will be held accountable. For the remainder.
The clock is from when the tree gets cut, not from the change of ownership. So if they cut another tree after that, then that's a new clock.
Yep.
Right. Any other discussion on extension of this from 24 to 36 months? Are we ready to vote? Cool. All those in favor of extending from 24 months to 36 months in support of Councilor Ryan's motion, please say aye.
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 I heard 2.
Aye.
I heard 3. The third one was untimely, but I'm willing to overlook that. Okay, all those opposed?
No.
No.
I think I heard 4, and I have not heard from Councilor Baker, I believe. Councilor Baker, are you there?
He's in the other meeting.
Okay, so that one fails 3-4 with 1 absent. Okay. I am interested in adding an exemption for 400 square feet of construction or under. I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, the reason is because that's considered de minimis under, I believe, our special permit statute. I'm looking to exempt folks who, you know, have to remove a tree to put a mudroom on, not the folks who are looking to tear down. And I think this is one way to distinguish those. I may or may not have support. We'll see. Haven't heard anyone stop talking, and I'm not seeing a lot of head nods. I'm not seeing a lot of shakes. I'm not getting a lot of feedback here. But hey, you know, I'm used to that. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Mr. Welch if doing this would be possible within his department to know what's 400 square feet, and is this something that he can manage?
So I think it does present challenges, but I think it's not any different. Correct me if I'm wrong. The proposal here would be for exempting tree replacement requirements, not exempting the need for a permit. So when someone applies for a building permit, they will need a tree permit. And as part of their building permit filing, they're going to need to say, how big is this addition or whatever the construction is. And we could even add it to the tree permit application as one of the questions as part of the process. So it will just be one more thing to read on the application. I think that piece of it is fine. I think the one thing that comes to mind is different people are really good at working the rules to their advantage. So they make an application. I actually had one that would probably fall under this very recently. Someone filed for doing a deck, and then they filed for doing an addition to the house, and then they filed for a garage, and none of those might trigger 400 square feet, but yet they filed 3 permits over a 2-month, or even I think it was even a month time period. So I would have to try to figure, if we were to do this, we would need to figure out a way to not allow people to file 10 different building permit applications to avoid the requirement.
No, that's a good point. That's a big loophole.
I wouldn't be overly concerned with that. I'm sure that's something that ISD can enforce. I don't think they allow multiple building permits for one project. Just my 2 cents.
Yep. Thank you, Jonah. And maybe if this passes, we could even tie it to a time frame and say that, like the 24 months, right? That there's no more than 400 square feet of exterior work within the 24 months. And that way it would, accumulate if there were multiple permits. Councilor Wright.
I don't support this. You're giving more loopholes there, and how Mr. Welch said, there's people have done it, kind of work around it. And what happens is they pulled a permit for 400 square feet and then they did 600 square feet. Okay. And ISD will come in. Oh yeah. Now you just got to fix your plans. But is there something in there to go back and say, oh, it is 600 square feet, not 400 per their plan. So now they have to pay for that. I just think there's just too many loopholes in here, and it would just be easier and cleaner not to have these exemptions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any more comments. President Albright, I see another comment.
I'm wondering if timing, and I was thinking about this before Deputy Commissioner spoke, but what about if timing is part of it? It's if a year or 18 months, if it's 400 feet within a year or 18 months after the tree permit, because, okay, if it seems clear in what was just described that they're trying to game the system, but if it's a year later, that's a little different story. So could you add a time? Would you be interested in adding a time frame to your de minimis?
Yes, I had been thinking of it the other way. I was thinking that any and all construction within the 24 months would accumulate and count towards the total. I think you are thinking of it the reverse, which is that if there's enough time in between permits, they're unrelated. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. That if it's under 400 square feet of work and no other, work permits are tied to that, or, within 6 months, that would push it above that threshold. Does that make sense, Jonah, in terms of how we sort of draft it?
Yeah, I think I would lean towards the version that you had stated previously, that if it's a total, anything beyond 400 feet of construction within the same 2-year period, I think administering that will be easier because you have the same time measurement.
Okay.
And I think you get to the exact same place.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Welch?
Yeah, the only thing that as we go through it, and maybe this is something that I can deal with law department if we get to the point where we're drafting this language, is being clear about what 400 square feet is. So I think of projects where folks come to us for extensive property renovations, including new pools, a small cabana, all probably, under 400 square feet, but they've actually done, taken 2/3 of the lot and completely changed it. So I think there is, I guess I'd want to be clear about what we're talking about, 400 square feet of living space or just 400 square feet of impacted area.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mark. And if the committee straw votes approval on this in the interim between the next meeting, we'll circle back with ISD on it, because I really think it will be an ISD calculation at the end of the day, and then they will be the one triggering in NewGov the tree permit part of it.
Let's see if we get there. So the proposal is to include in the exempt lots an allotment for 400 square feet of construction or under, presumably as determined by ISD or something along those lines. All those in favor of the excellent proposal set forward by the counselor from Ward 4, please say aye.
Aye.
I heard 3, I believe. Those opposed?
No,
No.
I heard 2, right?
Three.
And Humphrey and Baker?
I'm a no.
You're a no. That's 4 no's. And who am I missing?
Brenda?
I'm a yes.
4-4. So I lose 4-4. Okay, great. Okay. Anything else on the exempt law? I don't see anything else on the exempt law. Let me see. Okay, other definitions, right? Moving along now.
I had a quick question here.
Go ahead, Councilor Humphrey.
I was interested in the low income provision, just not as part of the previous thing we voted on related to that. So I don't know if Councilor Wright wanted to offer that, or I could offer that. I was
an
thinking
additional exemption, you mean?
Yeah, because I could see a scenario in which you have a low income homeowner, especially like a senior or something who's been living there a long time and isn't basically, yeah, I think there's not a lot of scenarios in which it might come up, but I could see some scenarios in which it might come up. And so a low income exemption, I would suggest 50% AMI or below would be grounds for an exemption.
Baker.
Mr. Chairman, just want to be clear, there is a property tax relief program which is tied to specific income thresholds. I'm not sure how widespread it is. If you were trying to tie it to something that's existing rather than trying to do in a special income qualification, if somebody's in that program, I could see the exemption being linked to that because they've already qualified for property tax relief. It seems to me that's a different story than someone coming in and saying, I'm low income and I want to take a tree down before they don't want to pay the fee. Is
that's fair? That's fair. I think that's actually, I hadn't thought about that, but we have a bunch of property tax relief points related to income that already do the means testing. So that seems like the way to do it to reduce the paperwork, unless the staff disagrees that that is not in fact reducing the paperwork.
Because it's a small number of situations, so not likely to be a widespread one, but it might be a true hardship that would benefit. The one other thing that I should point out is that, as I understand the assessing statute, aside from these basic categories where you have to go through a qualification process, any property owner can come in and say that I have a hardship in paying my property taxes. And one element of a hardship that legitimately could be raised is that I've got to pay a big tree permit expense. And maybe the assessors would take that into account, maybe they wouldn't, but at least there is some revenue, some means for people in hardship situations that don't directly relate to the property tax to come forward. And I don't know how common it is, but it's there. But if you want to do it, I would tie it to one of the small, not small, but low income thresholds that are part of the property tax.
I don't know if it's me. I think your sound, Councilor Baker, isn't great. I'm having a little trouble understanding you. Is it just me or are other people having trouble?
I'm even more murky than usual. I'm sorry.
It's kind of garbled.
Yeah, it's the audio. It is not you. Your articulation, your eloquence. It is exclusively an audio issue.
What I'll do, I'll try and plug in a phone and see if I do better. Okay.
Counselor Greenberg?
Thank you. I support this, but I'm just wondering how this is different from what we voted on earlier. With what Councilor Wright proposed.
Well, that's what I was trying to flag earlier when you were voting.
So what's the difference?
Go ahead, Counselor Humphrey.
So we were voting on eliminating the exemption around single and two family lots with no planned construction, so that single and two family lots would not have been exempt. And it also included a provision in replacing that with an income-based provision. And I'm saying this is a separate thing that's just about the income-based provision, and it's not addressing the single and two family lot exemption where there's no construction.
Okay, thank you.
Where is the proposal to add in the exemption? Is it to allow the tree warden to waive the fee for a low income individual? Is it somewhere tied to exempt status? Just
No,
curious.
this would, I was proposing that this was an exemption for property owners that would qualify for the criteria that Councilor Baker outlined. And again, I think that if the property ownership transfers to somebody else where that does not apply, then that waiver would also be rescinded within the 24-month period. Maybe I wasn't clear on that, but.
So currently the language creates an exemption for single and two family homes where no construction is planned for 24 months. And you would look to add to that sentence a condition saying like, or, single and two family homeowner who is low income.
I think so. I thought this was straightforward. What, am I missing something here?
I'm just asking how we're doing it. I think, are we saying, I'm wondering if we're saying that a single or two family homeowner who is low income is exempt from this, or if we are saying that a single and two family homeowner who is looking to remove trees can have the fee for those trees waived by the tree warden because they are single or because they're low income.
Oh, yeah. I'm saying this is a fee waiver for low income status.
Okay, so I'm going to defer to Jonah
again. Fee or
in
replacement. Yeah.
In my mind, this is sort of adding a sentence later on saying the tree warden may waive the fee for an individual who is low income. But Jonah?
Isn't the fee already waived for 1 and 2 families? I'm just pulling it up.
Well, I didn't say anything about 1 and 2 families. I was just saying as a general, because remember, there's also the rule about, related to construction happening and so forth, right? So there's a bunch of layers that are happening here. And I'm just saying, like, we could say that that if you're low income and you qualify for these existing programs, that the fee is waived. Again, I'm not imagining this is going to apply to a lot of people, but it might apply to a few people.
Mr. Chair, I think what Bill's trying to do is where somebody is not exempt, say they are putting in an addition or something, and they're low income, which
it's
be a very small number.
It's an unlikely scenario, I will grant you, but like, why not, belt and suspenders this?
Well,
go ahead, Councilor Baker.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that the only two places this exemption would kick in is where there is a fee required. And as Councilman Humphrey says, the 1 and 2 families are exempt unless they're construction. So there's a construction component. If that's the case, you want to exempt because they're low income. I'm a little uneasy about that because it's the whole question of construction related tear down within 2 years. If on the other hand, you're saying it's a 3 family and someone really is low income, although it seems odd that they would qualify under those conditions because they would be assuming they would have some rental income, they could be exempt. But those are the two situations, as I understand it, would be covered by the waiver. Am I missing something? Or? yield to Councilor Humphrey.
I mean, as with any scenario here we're discussing, everyone's always going to have to file the paperwork and documentation. It's just a question of whether or not they're subject to the replacement rules and the fee rules. And I'm suggesting that there are some potential scenarios in which somebody is low income, but they can qualify, for example, to get a line of credit on their home to build something. I know we had talked about ADUs and so forth, right? And potentially I understand that maybe this doesn't make sense because of all the different layers we've got on. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there that in case there's a scenario in which this would apply, that it would, but if people think it's too complicated, fine. I don't know.
I will add to this conversation that if it's the will of the committee, we can work on it. I agree it's complicated, but I would recommend the committee think about whether or not there's a real need for this provision before going further down the road.
That's my instinct is that it's a little complicated, and because of that, in a rare situation, that I would rather leave it to the property tax abatement process to take care of the true hardship.
Okay.
Which is the easier part of it.
All right. So yeah, sure. It's covered by a different city program.
So we'll move on. You want to withdraw any proposed
Well,
amendment?
I see Councilor Wright still has her hand up, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Counselor Humphrey. Yeah, it might not happen very often, but like what he said, they need to build, a couple of rooms on for their caretaker, elderly person, and they have some 0% interest loan or whatever, and they have to bring, take down some of these trees. So I think, exempting the fee for these people who get the tax relief program, I think would be a good thing.
Again, I didn't see it, but I don't remember the Lorax making an exception for low-income individuals. So I'm a little shocked to hear this, but I can work through that. Okay. Okay, so Councilor Wright is now proposing.
I'm supporting Counselor Humphreys.
Well, Counselor Humphreys, it's still on the table?
Well, I mean, I understand that it's like a weird edge case scenario, probably in all likelihood. But again, I think there's a scenario in which someone is low income, but they're doing some construction. So they would have triggered the fee. But then we should say that they don't have to pay the fee that's adding to that, cost for them. And as Councilor Wright just said, right, there's, whether it's for a caretaker or an in-law to move in to help you, or we had talked about ADUs as a potential way of getting some of the really, struggling seniors back on track financially by providing them a way to do this. It's going to be harder for them to do that if there's no fee waiver there. So that was what I had in mind. I know I wasn't explaining it clearly, but that was what I had in mind, was just to create a little bit of relief for somebody who is low income, but has triggered the fee and replacement requirements. And I'm saying this would be a reason for a waiver. If you qualified already for one of the existing means tested relief programs, then you also qualify for a waiver. I think it's also fair to say that if the property is transferred within the look back period, that waiver can be revisited, just like with any other look backs we've done.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Councilor Humphrey is interested in introducing a waiver for a low-income individual as determined by means tested programs through property tax relief that are in existence, for waiver from mitigation requirements. Correct?
Right.
Okay. Councilor Wright is supporting this. I'm going to quickly ask Mr. Temple, do you feel comfortable that we could draft this, at least as I've articulated it?
Yes, let it. We'll certainly try, and if we run into issues, we can raise it at the next meeting.
Okay. No, I think we can. I just want to make sure that we've sort of said enough of the things we need to say to be clear enough.
Yeah, I do think there's also questions of the of administering it and who's making
Uh,
the low income determination and reviewing that information. That's certainly not expertise that Mark would have. So we need to figure that out.
But if we made it that the
Right.
qualification is based on the existing qualification for other tax relief programs based on income, right? We have there are other departments that make those assessments.
Yes, that would make it much more black and white. I would say,
Right.
If I
rather
could
than
add,
tying it to AMI.
I think it's important to pick up on Councilor Humphrey's point. There's a difference between tax relief and tax deferral. There are some programs which say your property tax accumulates, but you're not paying it now, but it's an effective lien, and if you're doing it for a waiver, for that kind of property, I would think you would just say you're not paying the fee now, but if it's ever, ever sell the property, then the city gets made whole. That's different from somebody who's actually relieved from property tax, because of hardship or otherwise. So I think a lot of parties would correct that distinction, but I thought Councilor Humphrey's point was a wise one, to pick it up later if somebody actually sells the property and has the means to pay for it.
Right, you're saying some of the tax programs say you don't have to pay your taxes at all because you're low income, and some of the tax programs say we're not going to charge you the taxes now, we're going to wait and charge your estate after.
Or,
right.
Or say, yeah.
Right. And my proposal is, as Councilor Baker suggesting, for the programs where they're actually canceling out part of the taxes, which is something that has come through the Finance Committee a bunch of times from the Senior Services Department in the last several years.
So you're not interested in allowing deferral of compensation here of tree, payments, but waiver of tree payments if they would also be able to waive property taxes.
Right.
Senior. Okay. Any other comments before we vote on this? Okay. All those in favor of adding the low income exemption from the replacement requirements for individuals who qualify for tax waiver programs under existing statutes, please say aye.
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 I had 4. I believe that was Humphrey, Ryan, Princeman, Baker.
Sounded like
Right.
Greenberg unmuted.
Greenberg,
Greenberg's in too.
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Right.
Okay. I believe that's 6. Any opposed?
I'm gonna oppose.
Noel opposed. And abstentions?
I'm
President
going to
Humphrey?
abstain because I was listening to the other meeting during that conversation. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So, Councilor Humphrey, success. Congratulations, my man. That's a good one. Okay, so we have the low income exemption. I'm not sure if that's going to go into this section or not, but let's keep going on with 2182 and see what we've got. Okay, so the threshold on any privately owned lot requiring mitigation / compensation. We have changed the threshold, I think, from legacy to landmark. Do I have that right? Am I using the right terms? Jacqueline, do you remember?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And landmark, for those who are not looking at the definitions, landmark is, I believe, starts at 25 inches.
Landmark starts at 40.
40.
Landmark starts at 40, excuse me. Okay. And so the proposal was to lower this threshold down to a significant tree, which would start the mitigation requirement at 25 inches. Is that right? Councilor
Yes.
Maliki, are you here? Okay. Councilor Humphrey?
Oh, I was gonna say, I think based on the work we had done around the fee schedule and coming to a better understanding of what the fees would actually be, as well as the exemptions that we've put in, I'm comfortable going down to the 25 number, both on the understanding that now I know what the approximate fee system is going to be, and also that there are quite a few exemptions, so most people in most scenarios are not going to be dealing with this. It's only going to be in the construction scenarios, whether it's occupied or not, and that they haven't qualified for some other waiver. And so it's a relatively small amount of money being added for the cases that people are concerned about. That's my take on it.
Okay, so to be clear, I believe that the section that we were trying to exempt here, the section we were trying to change here, the proposal, and I wasn't clear about this before, so I apologize. In the exemption language, we said this statute, everything about the replacement requirements applies unless single and two family where no construction is planned for 24 months. But if it's a big enough tree, we don't even care. If it's a big enough tree, we're going to require compensation. We're going to require, and that's the one that started at landmark. Legacy tree, which is 55 inches or greater.
Well, actually, so that was I had emailed with Mr. Temple earlier, and maybe he can comment on this, but there was some ambiguity, I think, in the language of the text as to whether or not this was referring to the situations where there is an exemption or whether this is creating its own threshold. So maybe that needs to be cleared up. Yeah.
So there are two things. There was ambiguity over the change we made because it started at legacy tree again, which is 55 inches or greater. And the draft, before we amended it, the draft said if it's 55 inches or greater, we don't care. It's not exempt. You're going to have to mitigate against the removal of that tree because it's so big that we care about it no matter what. And this committee took a vote to, instead of saying legacy tree, if it's a landmark tree, suddenly we care, you're not exempt for anything. And that took it down to 40 inches. The ambiguity came in because we only said if it's a landmark tree. We didn't say if it's a landmark tree or greater. Okay,
well,
so
I actually
this ambiguity by saying basically 40 to 55 inches, suddenly we care, but over 55 inches, we don't care. So some of us wanted to clear up that ambiguity just by saying legacy tree or greater, and others are interested in changing the point at which that calculus begins.
Well, I was actually sorry. Maybe I'm misunderstanding here because I know that there's that, but that was actually not the part I was talking about in terms of ambiguity. Wait, so is your understanding, Mr. Chairman, then that all the stuff we've been talking about in terms of exemptions for single family and two family lots with no planned construction, that all goes out the window at a certain threshold diameter anyway?
Correct.
That's what we're, and okay, and so that is intended, and that's what we're voting on right now.
That's my understanding. Mr. Welch, Jonah,
okay, then
that is correct. That's how it's written now. It's written landmark. I would certainly add in or greater. I assume that's
right. Yeah. So, okay. So sorry, then I was misstating my position earlier then in that case. So I do have a later straw vote that's coming up that would address a distinction between occupied and non-occupied for this, but I think if that's your understanding of how we've structured this, then I would stay at 40 for this particular provision, but with the caveat that I'm coming back with another straw vote in just a few minutes that will address this in some other scenarios. Thank you.
That's all right.
So I would like to see it go down to significant, which is 25 inch. Because if we just bring it down to 40 inch, that means 50 to 100-year-old trees will be cut down, won't be protected. So that's still quite big trees. So I'd like to see it down to 25 inches. But what is our vote on right now? Is it to bring it down to 40 or is it to bring it down?
So we have we sort of have two votes to do.
Okay.
No matter what. Again, it's not that the trees won't be protected, though. It's that the trees are protected no matter what, even if they're on a single and two family lot with no construction plan. Right. So it's like an exemption from the exemption. And so currently it's drafted as landmark tree, which is 40 to 55 inches. Mm-hmm. The two choices we're going to have, unless someone offers a third, are whether to just make it 40 inches or greater, as opposed to just 40 inches to 55 inches, or whether to make it 25 inches or greater.
Okay, I support 25 inches or greater. Thank you.
And let me say, because I think the understanding of the committee is that we're setting a minimum threshold, and anything greater than that is what we're trying to include. The way it was currently drafted, it didn't do that, but that's part of the problem that we're trying to fix. Councilor Baker.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the reasons that I was in favor of this is that I thought it reached all of the properties in the city, even single and two families. So I thought it was a good idea. I'm a little concerned about going lower than that without having some better sense of the scale we're talking about and the degree to which we're picking up. I think we had some language in the past, excuse me, some discussion in the past. I just can't recall the scale of it, but I thought we made a positive move by going from legacy to landmark, and I'm prepared to go that far, or as you say, or greater. But I'm not yet ready to go all the way down to 25 inches. But I'm open to conversation and persuasion by colleagues and see what the scope of what we're talking about. Because as Councilman Humphrey pointed out, I think very much at the beginning, that anything 6 feet or more, 6 inches, not 6 feet, 6 inches or more, is going to be part of an inventory of some sort, right? That's so. The question is not whether we know that they're there, but the question is what is the threshold that we want to put this particular restriction in place. So I was in favor of moving down, as I indicated, but I like your argument on the other, on Councilor Wright's motion.
Councilor Malky.
Unmute. Okay, I like many people tonight, I'm in 2 meetings. I'm not sure what question you had for me, but I just would like to add on to the comment about, I think it's, obviously I would like to see down to 6 inches, but the category of
what we're talking about is the sort of exemption from the exemption in the threshold at which that begins. And you had proposed lowering that down from 40 inches to 25 inches.
Well, I would like to see it all the way down to 6, but at the very minimum, go down to 25, because in the range of 25 inches to 39 or 40, whichever you're making the cutoff, that's a really, not to use the word significant again, but there are very, very many really valuable trees, large trees. You'd look at it and you think that's a large tree in that category. I've been looking at a lot of situations where whether it's the backyard forest being torn, cut down, or the a tree at a time. But this is a category that you would be losing a lot of canopy if you don't include this. You'd be to exclude the 1 and 2 family properties in this category. You'd be losing a lot of very valuable trees. As Councilor Wright mentioned, the 150-year-old oak trees, they're likely to be in this size range. So I would urge you to, do what's good for the environment that we're all trying to care about and include that category. So thank you. And did you have a particular question for me?
No.
That I missed? Okay, I think they're voting in PSNT. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, obviously the city's initial proposal was for the 55-inch and larger trees, but we're comfortable going down to 40, but anything lower than that, it's not something that we can feel good about or support.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you. Mr. Welch, can you explain why you're not comfortable going down to 25?
We feel like the impact it will make to the non-construction scenarios would be too cumbersome, too much of a barrier for people trying to make basic and simple, whether that's changes, whether that's a garden or something smaller. Doesn't trigger a building permit. So we're only talking about things that don't trigger building permits. So oftentimes, a tree under 25 inches, 25 inches up to 40 is just something that we feel is important that people still have that opportunity to do for the very narrow examples, you know, the non-construction situations.
Thank you.
President Albright?
I'm sorry to, because I got confused between the two meetings. Can you just explain to me, what are we doing here? We're reducing from 40 to 25, but what are we reducing?
Yes, and then I'll have a word with Councilor Downs, because I don't like the extent to which she is, actually, I like that she's distracting Councilor Malky, but I don't like that she's distracting one of my committee members, so. I'm joking, people, I hope you understand. Okay, we are talking about the fact that in our ordinance right now, there is sort of an exemption from the exemption. And what that means is trees over a certain diameter breast height are not able to be exempted. So even if they are on a single or two family lot with no construction planned, if a tree is of a big enough size, compensation is required for that tree's removal. And that started in Mr. Welch's proposal at 55 inches. We as a committee took a straw vote a few months ago to lower that threshold down to 40 inches. The proposal is currently from Councilor Malky to lower that to 25 inches or 6 inches, depending on which one she wants to put forward. And maybe I'll have to distinguish to know which one I'm voting against. But at the moment, I believe it's to go to 25 inches.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking about. So if I want to create a garden on my property and the only place to put it is shielded by a tree, then I would have to pay, I have to go back down to the bottom or to that pink column. 25 inches.
If the tree is 40 inches or more, you're going to have to compensate for that either by planting new trees, you know, to the extent or payment in lieu of that. If the tree is 28 inches at the moment, and you don't have construction plans, you would not have to. But under Councilor Malaky's proposal, you would. Have I said that right? Anyone who is paying attention?
So if it were 28 inches, according to that pink column in the proposed possible fees, it would be about close to $10,000. So I'd have to pay $10,000 to take down a 28-inch tree to create a garden in my backyard. So I would not be in favor of that.
Councilor Humphrey.
Mr. Yo, I was hoping if you could clarify, is it the position of the administration that there will be a veto if this goes down below 40?
Well, I am not the mayor, so, but I know she feels strongly about this 1 and 2 family exemption, and our original proposal was at the legacy level at 55 inches, and it's come down to 40, which is going to add a lot of trees for sure. Going from 40 to 25 is, I'm just thinking in my own yard, I have many trees that are in the 30-inch range. And if I wanted to put in a garden or a swing set or you name it, things that are, you know, a raised garden bed is going to cost you a couple $100, but then you add on $10,000. You know, it's, to us, that's really not a reasonable thing. And it's going to be a lot more challenges for homeowners. So I think we're comfortable where it is at 40.
Thank
So
you for
I can't,
clarifying.
I'm not exactly going to predict what the mayor's going to do and not do, though.
I appreciate the clarification. And also I would just say that my guess, I obviously haven't talked to anybody, so it's not an open meeting law thing, but my guess is that the full council would also probably have a hard time getting to a majority consensus below this number. So thank you.
Okay. Councilor Baker.
Mr. Welch's comment, I do think it's important to get the support of the administration and get something out of the committee that we think will fly on the floor of the council and not get into a difficulty. And this is, we've seen just by the process we've gone through that this is one where if the will of the council to revisit this question again in the future, I think we're getting a better framework if it turns out that there's a different number of, and we're losing more trees than along that line we can revisit and come back. But I would like to get something moved forward that will do something soon rather than have us all held up. So I guess I'm persuaded to stay with the 40 inch, as much as I am sympathetic to both Councilor Maliki and Councilor Wright in the objective, but I'd rather get something started on this one.
Okay, let's vote on this. Two successive votes. First vote is, are you interested in moving the minimum threshold at which all trees are going to count towards this or be implicated in the ordinance from 40 to 25 inches? If you're interested in passing the amendment as proposed by Councilor Maliki, say yes. If you're not interested, please say no. Those in favor of reducing from 40 to 25 inches, please say yes.
Yes.
1. Those opposed? No.
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 I think that was 7. Any abstentions? Okay, 1 to 7. Do I have unanimous consent, though, to make the change that it's the landmark tree designation or greater? So essentially 40 inches or greater, not just 40 to 55 inches. Everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Another issue that has come up, and maybe this is the place for it, Mr. Welch, I'm going to ask you. We've talked about sugar maples, invasive trees, and a need to exempt species like that, or a desire to exempt invasive species from this. I don't think, I was looking through it, I don't remember adding the language in there to any extent for that purpose. And it feels like we want to encourage the removal of invasive species, but is this the place to do it? And can you speak to what we've done on that, Mr. Welch?
So from our perspective, the only instance where we feel comfortable with allowing invasives, and usually we speak of Norway maples, there are others, Norway maples, is when we speak of removing Norway maples for a positive purpose. The current tree ordinance theoretically allows for this. I think we would want to just make the language a little clearer, and I think it's later on is where we tackled that. But the intent would be that we're comfortable with allowing, would have to have a conversation with the person doing the application and feel confident that what they're doing is purely for the benefit of the environment. But if someone were to come to us for the benefit of the environment, removing Norway maples for another purpose, for a natural purpose, then we would be comfortable working that out at the tree warden level. We're not interested in exempting the removal of Norway maples on every lot, because oftentimes that's the developer situation and we'd be granting them the ability to remove trees without any replacement. And Norway maples do provide, they have a negative benefit, but they also have a significant positive benefit to the environment as well.
I guess there have been a number of proposals brought forward from the community and various groups on how to potentially finesse the language. I don't know if you had received any or all of those. Some of the things that we had seen suggested expanding some of the language around environmental benefits to not just refer to other trees, but potentially wider ecological conditions. I think that maybe we could also have a distinction again with occupied versus non-occupied lots or something like that. But, we had certainly seen concerns raised about the wider impacts on flora and fauna around those invasives because they're not from around here originally. And I don't know if you had any particular thoughts on that. And I guess also just that we could potentially, I don't know if it's addressed already in the ordinance, but deal with the replacement question, right? Because if they're replacing an invasive with some natives, maybe we handle that differently than a typical replacement. I don't know if you had any commentary on any of that.
I think the only, off the top of my head, the main thought, and I can't remember, I apologize, who said it earlier, maybe it was Councilor Wright. The more opportunities the more layers we add to different reviews and different approvals, the greater opportunity people will manipulate the outcome. And I think back to some large development projects over the years where lots of trees were removed. And there was a scenario where I can see them making an argument that they all got to go and it's all perfectly fine and we're not going to replace it. And I'm talking, 5, 6, 7 acres worth of trees that were mostly invasives. I would be concerned that the outcome would not be what we're hoping for here. But I do believe that we could come up with a scenario where if tree removal is for the true benefit of the environment, I don't think incentivizing removing Norway maples, making it requiring less replacement for the removal of Norway maples by a builder or developer, I don't think that is going to change their approach to construction. I think they're going to cut it all down where they want to cut it down, regardless of tree species. At least that's my thought. My biggest concern, though, is creating more layers and opportunities for people to manipulate the system.
So, Mr. Welch, what I'm hearing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that maybe it would make more sense to provide some authority for the tree warden to waive mitigation requirements if the removal of the trees is in the best interest of the environment.
Yes, and
okay.
Theoretically, I got to look. Theoretically, that's sort of the language now. The tree ordinance, our current tree ordinance, we all treat it as if it's a requirement to replace inch per inch, but it is really a language that says they got to replace inch per inch unless determined by the tree warden. There is a benefit to not replacing inch per inch. That's not how we do it. That's not how we enforce it. We enforce it as inch per inch, but there is some.
That. I don't recall seeing that language.
Okay. I only have the new draft in front of me, so I don't say the older language, but it's a very quick one.
I thought you were reading it. I apologize. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. If you find it and come across it, let me know. I'll move on to the next issue, and then if you think of it, we can talk about it.
Sure.
All right, Councilor Humphrey, occupied, non-occupied. You're up.
Yes. So this is a narrower question than what we had taken up a few minutes earlier. The question is on non-occupied lots, would there be any objection from the administration to bringing down that threshold where there's construction happening? So in that sense, the owner doing the construction on the non-occupied lot would have to do the full mitigation payment or replacement at a much lower threshold, and while the exemption would still remain in place for occupied lots that we've already talked about quite extensively tonight, because I think those are two different scenarios there.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe Mr. Temple, but I think the exemption is only for single and two family occupied lots. So
yeah, that's correct.
I don't think any non-occupied lot is exempt.
Well, so I guess so that could be right.
That's correct.
But let me give a specific scenario here, just so that we're all on the same page, and then I can move on if we have it covered. I just wanted to make sure that it was.
Sure.
So if we have a non-occupied lot where there's construction happening and they get the permits to take down, every tree on the lot or whatever, including the ones that are like 7 inches, they're required under this proposal to do the full mitigation and replacement, even though we're talking about 7 inches as opposed to the higher threshold.
Yes, that's the intent.
Protected trees are 6 inches and above.
Right. Okay.
You mean like a 5-inch tree?
No, I'm asking about 6. I'm asking 6 inches. But part of the reason, even if we don't have to vote on this because it's already there, is I wanted to clarify this also for the benefit of the public, because there's been so much language around the idea that geographically we're exempting a majority of the city, when of course it's not about geographics, it's about the specific conditions of the situation, and that apparently it's already addressed in there. So the developers are in fact going to have to pay when they're, clear cutting even a 6 or 7 inch tree. And I just wanted that to be definitively clear in our minds. Whether it was in there or not, I wasn't sure. So thank you.
Unless someone disagrees, I think they have to compensate for any protected tree that's removed.
That is correct.
Yeah, that when we just talk about the concept of exemption, we talk about the 1 and 2 family lots. We are specifically referencing that it is an occupied lot, and then we have a definition for occupied lot. So if it's not occupied, it won't fit that criteria of being exempt from the replacement requirements if there's no construction.
And also, if it's like a 3 family, whether or not there's construction, I'm assuming that also means the 6 inches triggers it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm clear on it now. I just wanted to make sure that we had a very specific discussion on that point. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. And I don't make any of my comments to discourage any of these things from coming up. I'm just trying to tell you where I'm coming from, or what I believe the status of the ordinance is. Okay. I don't see anything else in 2182. Am I missing anything? Going once, going twice here on 2182. Jacqueline, I didn't miss anything, did I? Or,
Nope.
Jacqueline, are you in PSNT also?
No,
kidding.
I'm here.
Okay, just kidding. Sorry. Okay. 2183. In this section, we talk about the permit applications, and one of the things that came in here was a requirement to notify others of a tree application. And so what in subsection C, I think it is, the committee has added language. Let me pull it up. Let me read specifically what the language says so we know what we're talking about. The city shall use the online permitting system to automatically generate notifications of tree permit applications to abutters of the lot on which the protected tree is located. And the proposal is to increase the notification radius to not just direct abutters, but anyone within 200 feet radius. That proposal is made by Councilor Wright. Councilor Wright, let you speak to that. And I know Mr. Yo has something to say about this as well, so I'll come to Mr. Yo afterwards. Councilor Wright.
Yeah, so my issue is these trees, they have a big spread, and on the north side of the city and also down in parts on the south side too, are very small lots. So one tree, it can be affecting 3 or 4 or 5 different lots. So I think, you know, you wanted to notify everyone who's affected by it, but then that gets a little difficult, you know, to determine that. So we should have so many feet. Now, if you're in Chestnut Hill, you know, if it's 200 feet, then just your neighbor, if that, you know, but if it was in Nonantum, that might be 6 or 8 people. And the tree is affecting all of them, depending on the size of the tree. So I don't think just abutters is the correct way to go, unless you just say just abutters in certain parts of the city, but other parts of the city, more than just the abutters being affected.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Mr. Yo.
Thank you very much. Couple things on this. First of all, NewGov is not set up to be doing automatic letters. I mean, I think we're a little too prescriptive here in the text. So NewGov won't be doing that. This will be done by Mark's staff if it's needed. Second is, we do feel that keeping it just to the abutters makes the most sense, and that's actually the easiest way that happens through, you know, like we do with the clerk's office I think also this whole notification thing, I don't know, the law department can weigh in here at some point, but I think we're very concerned about it. It is not what we do with building permits. And it sets up some kind of expectation. I'm very concerned about what happens to the tree warden in the middle of what will then become neighborhood battles. And this whole notification system is concerning for a variety of reasons. And it might set up an unreasonable expectation that folks are going to stop people from cutting trees down, which that's not what's going to happen here. So a couple things. So NewGov isn't going to be sending automatic letters. This is all going to be a manual operation. Number 2, if we're going to have notification, which frankly, I don't think we really should, but then it should be just to the abutters through the normal system that we have, like with notifications. So that's my thinking on it. I think the law department's been thinking also about this whole notification system, as well as the so-called appeal system as well. Thank you.
Mr. Temple, did you
Yeah.
want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I can speak to it briefly. I have to say, just from a legal perspective, I have real concerns conceptually about this abutter notice provision. It is very infrequently under the law that we are required to notice abutters. And when in those instances, we are often challenged and sometimes sued for not doing notice properly. So giving ourselves a legal notice obligation where it's not required, I really have concern about that.
Thank you, President Albright.
Yeah, can I just also just quickly mention, Mr. Chair, that if there is going to be notification, you know, it probably really should be done by the developer or the homeowner, you know, not necessarily the city. So just another thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add off that point that there are other ordinances and other situations where we do put the notice obligation on the petitioner and the person doing work, and I would certainly feel more comfortable with that. I mean, I think as it's written, the abutter notice, it's a pretty extraordinary provision.
So I would,
President Albright.
thank you. I would agree that if there's notification, it ought to be placed in the hands of the person who wants the change as opposed to the city. But I'm wondering what role does the abutter have? What rights does the abutter have? So if I'm cutting down a tree in my backyard and I let my abutter know and they say, no, I don't want you to do that. Do they have any rights? Do they have any, can the city say, well, the abutter doesn't want it, so therefore, no, you can't cut down your tree? And that's I guess a question for Mr. Temple.
Yeah, they don't. And I think that's another really strong reason why we shouldn't be doing abutter notices. And it speaks to what Jonathan said as well, in terms of creating some expectation or creating some, you know, situation where Mark needs to always be working with these abutters. They don't, this ordinance is not designed to protect the abutters' interests. So notifying them is really incongruous with the ordinance in itself.
This reminds me a lot of having spent a lot of years on land use. If someone wants to add or expand, let's say, a second floor bedroom, and then there's a public hearing, and the abutters will come and say, well, I have a view of the field in the next property, and now they're going to add that bedroom, and it's taking away my view of that field in the distance. And, you know, that's not a good reason to get someone to not build a second bedroom or expand a second bedroom. I really think that the abutters have no rights. I don't know why we're starting neighborhood battles this way. So I would certainly not expand it, for one thing. And for the second thing, I would change the ordinance to not notify.
Okay, sounds like we're going to have 2 votes before us. Although if the vote to expand is successful, I'm not sure we're going to need a second vote. Councilor Baker.
Oh, can I come through clearly? Am I a little less murky? And that sound better?
Sound good to me, sir.
Okay. So I think that I would keep the abutter notice. I wouldn't expand it, but I understand the rationale of Councilor Wright, but I think there's enough difficulty having a abutter notice anyway that I don't want to try and carry the burden further than I should. But I do think there is, if the abutter notice is carefully drawn and framed, it would make a difference, because there are times when a conversation can occur and a positive one. I mean, if the note said, look, the applicant has filed an application to take the tree down, and there is a payment that the applicant can choose to pay. If the abutter says, no, well, this is very important to me, and have the conversation, and they change their mind because they've done something to persuade them properly, I'm not troubled with that, but there's no right to prevent the takedown, as I understand it, right? The tree can still come down and the payment can be made. It's just that there is an opportunity for someone affected by it to be aware of it. And it seems to me that is a positive thing in the city. It doesn't automatically give rise to a fight because there's no right. But if there's an opportunity for a conversation, I think that might be a positive thing. But it has to be very clearly spelled out in the abutter notice that this is not something that is going to give you the right to prevent the tree from coming down, because I agree with those who feel that that would be misleading and lead to a conversation that is not a positive.
Councilor
Oh, by the
Ryan.
way, the other point I just want to make, we do have places in our ordinance where we provide notice where we're not required by law. The traffic council ordinance, for instance, provides for notice to people on the street where we're changing the ordinance. There's no state statute that requires that, to my knowledge, but we do it because it's good policy. So I'm not troubled by the idea of notice on our own account, but I think the question, the scope of the notice and what it says and what rights it implicitly provides are really important to clarify.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tend to agree with Councilor Wright on this. Having run into situations with this from abutters of construction, but the thing is it's kind of murky because a lot of times the problems that come from cutting down the trees or from building near the trees and on root systems has already happened. And it's a cleanup and it's a call mark and it's just, I don't know how to work it, but the other thing is you know, the notification when you're tearing down a home, the notification to the abutters is from the developer. And I think that's what we're talking about, who's given notice on other things. I don't know if you'd want to add to that notice. I know it doesn't cover every tree that's coming down on property, but if it was part of tear down notice from a developer, maybe the trees could be part of it. But like I said, it's really hard. I know a lot of my constituents, especially in precinct 4, would like to be notified because the lots are, you know, 7,000 square feet and some are smaller and a few are larger, but not by much. And you're right, the root systems go into other yards and the tree canopy goes down. I mean, I had this situation happen to me where all the huge pine trees, 4 of them, 2 on each side of my house that were in the abutting properties came down. Plus they also ruined my fence, taking them down, and they had to fix it and pay for it. But, you know, I probably would be supporting this. I will be supporting it. Thank you.
It sounds like you talked yourself into it there. Midway through.
Yeah, I did. I think it's more bringing notice to this.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Maliki.
Yes, oh my gosh, sorry.
Do you know what we're talking about?
Yes, I do, because public safety has ended. I would support obviously keeping the abutter notification and also extending it to the 200 feet abutters. President Albright mentioned that it could cause conflict, but really, if there's going to be the conflict already exists when people are shocked. I mean, you've all read the letters. We're getting letters from people who are just devastated when trees next door to them get removed and they've had no warning about it and no opportunity to express to the person who's doing it how it's going to affect them. As Councilor Ryan was mentioning, you know, the roots of the tree that's being cut down might extend onto, you know, the neighbor's property, and it's doing the job of absorbing stormwater on their property and keeping water out of their basement. It might be providing shade and screening. And I think it was Councilor Leary in a prior meeting mentioned the value of making sure that the abutter is aware of it and give them a chance to talk to the person who is planning to take the trees down and let them know how it would affect them. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you. So I feel a little bit as though we're going in some circles on this one, just because we did have quite an extensive discussion on this the first time it came up for straw votes, and I understand that some people wanted a very strong notification provision and some people wanted no such provision. And I think we've heard some of the arguments for the advantages of at least having some type of notification. First, there's the opportunity for neighborly conversation, as Councilor Baker mentioned and Councilor Maliki just alluded to. Yes, it doesn't necessarily, change the outcome, but it might, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And additionally, one thing that we've heard is that there have been cases when there were illegal tree removals that were not permitted in any way, and they weren't even on the radar of the department. And if people know that they're supposed to be getting a notification as an abutter and they didn't get any notification, that might buy, a critical couple of hours there to say, hey, I better call the tree warden out here to see what's going on because this doesn't seem to have been permitted, and you might be able to save some trees or at least get them properly, dealt with in the appropriate legal manner. That's the argument in terms of why having a notification, even if there's no standing to do anything about it, which I agree is probably a bridge too far. But also in terms of this particular straw vote, I think the compromise that we had come to at the previous round of straw votes is the one that makes the most sense to me, because I think that that's doable to do those notifications when it's direct to butters, and it's a lot more work and a lot more challenging to do it for the 200-foot radius. So that seemed like a relatively reasonable option to me. So I would like to keep what we already had voted on and not to expand it, and also not to retract it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. And to be clear, what we will first vote on is whether to expand it. If that fails, we will then vote on whether to remove it entirely. If the vote to expand it passes, I'm going to assume we don't have the support. The support isn't there to remove it. So, Councilor Wright.
A couple of things. I mean, if 200 is too much for people, I think abutters to abutters would be good. And historic, I get notices for potential tear downs, historic older homes a block away. So I don't see why it's too difficult. And the thing is, where these where these trees are coming down are really affecting these small lots. This is, I'm working with another person right now, but I've heard a few people, they've, had to put in French drains and things like that because their basements flood. My neighbor cut down 6 trees in the backyard. Now my, basement floods. If you have a half acre, 3/4 acre lot, you're not affecting your neighbor. But when the lots are only 5,000 square feet, what you do on your lot does affect it. And having the notice, there can be that conversation. In land use all the time on the special permits, when the people don't talk to their neighbors, Councilor Lipoff, send them back and say, go talk to your neighbors first and then come back to us. So it's to have that conversation. Maybe, yes, it's not going to change them. Maybe it might change a little bit, but especially the neighborhoods with the small lots, this affects them the most. And this is the place where there's less trees and does the most damage to people's houses, and air conditioning, and it goes on and on and on. So if there's, not enough support for 200 feet, I would like to do abutters and abutters.
I'll add that on at the end. If the first one fails and the second one fails, I'll add that one on as a third vote. It's good. I don't want to get through this too quickly tonight. So if other people have opportunities to add additional votes, great. Councilor Maliki.
I thought she amended her motion, Mr. Chairman. So
well, I think first she wants 200 feet, and if there isn't support for that, she's going to try.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
With abutters of abutters.
Okay.
Council President Albright.
So I think there's one more vote, and that is if the notification stands, then we should transfer the notification to the applicant, not the city.
Okay, you're right. I stand corrected. Thank you, President Albright. Right there on my request. Thank you. Anyone else able to add another vote to this issue? Councilor Greenberg.
Nothing to add, just a question.
Oh.
I'm sorry. So if it's on the homeowner to send out notifications, how do we know that happens?
We could
So
require as
enforcement.
part of the application that they submit proof of mailing of the notifications.
Okay. Right now I support just the direct abutters and that's it. Thank you.
Okay. First question. Expanding the sphere of notification to 200 feet, expanding from beyond abutters to 200 feet. All those in support of that, let me hear you say aye.
Aye.
I hear one. Those opposed?
No.
Aye.
No.
Okay, I heard 4 half-hearted no's.
No.
No.
Okay, I'm hearing some more enthusiastic no's, so I think that's 1 to, any abstentions there? Okay, so that's 1 to 7 against 200 feet. Okay. Next up on the list was to eliminate this provision entirely, the notice
I think
provision
it was
to
butters to
abutters.
butters. Mr.
No,
Chairman.
well, first we're going to vote on Councilor President Albright's motion, which was to remove notification to abutters. If that fails, then we have to talk about abutters to abutters and the method of notification. Okay. President Albright is asking to eliminate this provision. I will say that I support that. I think we're doing nothing but causing animosity between neighbors. I think that was a good point. I had a neighbor who wanted to remove trees, and the neighbor came and told me about it, and we had a conversation. Oddly, that conversation wasn't mandated by any ordinance, and it wasn't required, and it didn't come as a result of any notification that anyone was required to send. Even if it was, you know, exclusively benevolent conversations as mandated by Councilor Baker, it happened. And we didn't have to require that. We didn't have to tell neighbors how to relate to each other. So I'm in favor of removing this. I think it's just going to cause more problems than, you know, positive results. But we'll see. I don't know. We have the support. Okay, so President Albright wants to eliminate this provision. All those in favor of eliminating the notification to abutters, please say aye.
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 That's 3 I heard. Those opposed to eliminating the provision.
No.
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 1, I heard 2.
There's 3.
3, I have Wright, Ryan, Baker,
Greenberg.
Greenberg, 4.
I'm opposed to it. Yeah. No.
Okay. Is there an abstention there? Were there only 3 in favor? Doesn't matter. It either fails 4 to 4 or it fails 3 to 5. Right? So we're not eliminating it. Okay. The next item would be the method. As articulated, we talked about notification by the city. And I think President Albright, if I'm not mistaken, or others would like to switch that to be a notification by the petitioner of the abutters. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So President Albright wants to put the requirement to notify abutters as it stands now on the petitioner. Looks like we have some comments on that. Councilor Ryan.
Right, well, I thought we were doing the direct abutters because I want to clarify what a direct abutter is. I know that sounds crazy, but I do.
Right now it is direct abutters who would be required to be notified, but the question is it the petitioner who notifies them or is it the city?
Yeah, right, but what I'm saying in certain areas of the city that that's only separated by a pathway and to me that's also a direct abutter, and you could argue that it wasn't.
The next vote we're going to take is whether to expand to abutters of abutters.
All right.
Okay. Councilor Wright.
So take Councilor Baker. I just gotta get my thoughts together. Sorry.
Did you raise your hand at a bad time for you? Okay. Councilor Baker. I'll come back to you. I'm just kidding. Councilor Baker.
I'm going to encourage us to stay with the idea that the city provides notification. The city is used to this. It's a process that it happens all the time. If it comes from the city, it's certainly more reliable. Putting the burden on the property owner risks the problem of not getting notice. Then what happens? Somebody comes in and says, I wasn't notified, this didn't work. And that's the kind of mess that I'd rather not have. It seems to me that I prefer a reliable, simple system. I'm not going to support adding abutters to abutters as sympathetic as I am to that. for just that reason. I think the notice ought to be relatively narrow and easy enough for the city to do. But the city has systems for notifying abutters all the time. So I don't see that as a significant objection. Excuse me.
Okay, so I
it's just
think what I'm hearing you say, Councilor Baker, and please don't let me say anything you're not saying, is you're okay with the sort of discretion. And I think what we heard from Mr. Yo and Mr. Temple is that we shouldn't be so prescriptive as to say the city's permitting system, blah, 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 just to say the city shall notify direct abutters of a tree permit.
Yeah, that's
and leave it up to the city if it stays. You want to keep it, but you're also okay with giving it to the discretion of the city for how to facilitate that notification.
It needs whatever flexibility. Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Wright.
Yep, I remember my question.
Okay.
My question was what notices do the city give out now? Because it was mentioned, well, they don't do any, but I thought the city does do some, and Councilor Baker was alluding to that too, that they do it all the time.
Well, certain departments have the capabilities to do it. The city clerk's office does it for public hearings, for zoning matters, and for special permits. Councilor Baker raised traffic council. That is true. Some notices go out, but I believe those may be legally required, and notices of hearings under some historic ordinances may be required as well.
Okay, so I'm fine. I think we should keep it with the city. I don't think we should prescribe it exactly. It has to come through NewGov or whatever, but the city would provide notice. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say, Mr. Chair, that the issue really is about expectation, and then having to, we can't duplicate Mark. Having Mark then in the middle of all of these neighborhood battles, I'd rather have the petitioner, as you said, the neighbors talking to the neighbors. You know, Mark isn't here to referee all of these things across the city and then to wade into this. Frankly, we don't have more Marks. He works plenty of hours a week as it is. So I'm just very concerned about this whole notification and the expectation of what the city is going to do. It's fine if the neighbors talk to each other, and if they can figure something out, that's great. But drawing the city into this really concerns me. So, thank you,
President Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was going to make a similar comment to what Mr. Yo just said. I mean, our tree warden is the same person who's the deputy commissioner of the Department of Parks and Rec. And he's not exactly flush with staff. Nobody in the Parks and Rec department is flush with staff. They don't have a clerk's office like we have. We're not flush with staff either, but at least we have people who are hired to do that work. And the Parks and Rec department doesn't really have that. And I don't know how many jobs Mark can do at the same time, but adding this administrative burden to the tree warden / deputy commissioner, it just feels wrong. And I think we have to take that into account.
Councilor Baker.
So I just think the value of having the city frame the notice is such that it's done in a way that you can do just what Mr. Yo indicated, and saying this is not a matter where the city has discretion. Just be aware that the permit will issue upon payment of the amount, and there's no right of appeal. It's just that we want you to be aware, and that seems to me the value of having the city do it is it can frame the document in a way that minimizes the kind of risk that Councilor Albright is justifiably concerned about.
So why can't the city provide a template for how the letter should read, and not have to send them out, but provide the template?
That is a possibility. And Councilor Baker, we had this very same discussion, if you remember, with short-term rentals, and we ended up with a robust notice provision as to everything that needed to be included, but that it was done by the operators of the short-term rentals.
Oh, I understand. See where the committee goes.
Councilor Norton, welcome back to Programs and Services. Wonderful to see you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I'm late. We just got out of public facilities discussing
That's
stuff.
okay. You can be late anytime. Come as late as you want,
Oh, you're very kind. Although if I'm too late, I wouldn't make it to the meeting. So I don't know what
but
you're saying.
really, come as late as you want.
Exactly. I wanted to comment that I think that a butter notification is important. So thank you for that vote. In terms of who does it, I strongly support the city doing it. I'm in a historic district. They're able to let me know when someone on the next door neighbor wants to put new shutters on. And I had another point. Oh, to President Albright's point, totally understand we don't want to make things more onerous on our staff, but I do want to sort of remind us big picture that our budget reflects our values. And right before I joined the council, then the board, it was a big fight about budgeting for one sustainability director. There really was a lot of consternation about spending that money. Not everyone on the board was in agreement on that. We are now up to 3, I believe, full-time people, if not maybe 2.5 or 2 2/3 in the sustainability office, because we've decided as a city, or as a city council at least, that we think that that's worth investing in. I will posit to you that I think our tree canopy, for all the benefits that I'm sure have been talked about tonight, if not in previous meetings, are worthy of that investment. So I would just put that out there, that we could pass a very strong tree ordinance and then determine that we think it's worth it to invest in the people to really enforce it, run it, and so forth, so that we could actually grow our tree canopy. Thanks.
Councilor Malky.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Norton, for that reminder about budgets reflecting our values. I don't think we should be using the inadequate funding for forestry as a reason to not do anything to improve the situation. With regard to Mr. Yo's comments about, if neighbors want to talk to each other, that's fine. But how are they going to know to talk to each other if the person cutting down the tree does not happen to notify the abutters? Councilor Krinsman is lucky to have a neighbor who came to talk to him, but that's not always the case. So I would say keep the notification with the city. We managed to do it for other things. Thank you.
President Albright.
I'm sorry, I just can't help myself. So I think that the sustainability directors share that job, each half. That's the one thing. The second thing is, if we were going to add more money to the Parks and Rec department, it wouldn't be for an administrative staff person to send out notices. It would be for money to increase the fields. It would be for lots of things in the Parks and Rec department. The last thing on my list to increase the money going into Parks and Recs would be for somebody to send out notices. So come on, really.
If I could just respond quickly, I was just commenting that if we think that we should have resources for trees, then we should have resources for trees. I really, seems like I ticked you off for some reason, that I really.
No, I'm fine.
I didn't mean that they had to be, that we were hiring people to send out notices. Those were 2 separate points I was making, just to be very clear. And we have, in terms of sustainability, we have Ann Berwick, Bill Ferguson, and Leora Silks. And then in addition, whatever administrative support they get. So we do have a lot of resources in sustainability, which I think is great.
Okay, thank you. The motion on the floor is to amend the notification provision, which at the moment is to direct abutters, and to make it a responsibility of the petitioner instead of the city. All those in favor of switching this provision to make it a requirement of the petitioner to notify direct abutters, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that is 4. I had Krinsman, Albright, Ryan, and Greenberg. All those opposed?
No.
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 Humphrey Baker and a right on mute. Councilor Noel, are you here?
I'm going to abstain on that. I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Abstention means that it switches to the petitioner by a vote of 4 to 3 to 1.
Okay. I apologize. I'm off camera. It's been a long night. I'm into some snacks, so I'm off camera.
No problem. Listen, when the gummies kick in, be careful how you vote, okay? But enjoy them for now. I think this addresses the other issue, Councilor Baker, we had, which was the prescription of the permitting system, because that's now off the table, as it's a responsibility on the petitioner. So we won't have to address that.
Um,
But we do
well,
have to come back to Councilor
before
Wright's
you-
point about
Mr.
abutters of
Chairman?
abutters.
Well-
I'm sorry, before you go there though, I do think the point was a template of some sort might be valuable, and I don't know how that's done, maybe just as a recommendation to the department or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's not necessarily part of the ordinance, but something that can happen. Councilor Wright, go ahead, sorry.
Also, if we're gonna do that, I'd like to add in that it needs to be shown that they did send it to the butters. We were talking about that earlier, proof that it does go out.
Part of the tree permit application
Yeah.
process.
Yep.
We can add in that language, and we can also add in language that the notice must be provided in a form as dictated by the tree warden, and then that form can be up on the website.
And it should be within so many days too, or when, you know.
Well, I
so
think
many
it would
days
be
before
prior to filing the application because proof of the notice will be included with the application.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm guessing it's unanimous on that folks are okay with that method, right? Any objections? Okay.
And
yes,
is there anything if they don't do it? What
They
if
wouldn't be able to
don't
get
do
their
it?
tree permit,
Okay, so they don't get their tree permit if they don't, okay, good.
right? If correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but if we make that a requirement of the process, that's one of the boxes that, you know, Mr. Welch will have to check off in order to successfully complete the process and give out the permit.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so we all agree on that. Jonah, thank you. And we'll look forward to that being included when we see the draft of the ordinance. The other issue we have to deal with is abutters of abutters. Councilor Wright wants to expand the notification that now the petitioner will have to provide to not just direct abutters, but abutters of abutters.
And now since the petitioner has to do the mailings, it should be on them. So I don't see why we can't go to abutters of abutters.
Right, Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, I go back to the point I was trying to make is, you know, what are we gonna consider a butter? Because I think an abutter is across the street too. And not just you know, the next house is over, it's across the street, or in the case of wonderful Oak Hill Park, across the pathway. You know, which is not even a street, but we already had a couple of situations where trees across the pathway affected the homes on the other side, so. I know it's different down there, but I have to think of those things for myself and the constituents. You know, it can be quirky, but that's the way it is. So, I mean, if we want to call that abutters, fine, but I want it clarified that those people are involved in this. You know, and are considered an abutter. That's it.
You know, my only suggestion, I'm open to whatever folks want to say, but it might be the type of thing where you want to provide some discretion maybe to the tree warden to determine who the direct abutters are or who abutters of abutters are in case there's ambiguity. You know, like a pathway or something along those lines. I don't know, Mr. Temple, Mark, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I would, since we're taking the city out of the notification process, I don't think they should be involved in who gets the notice. We should just be clear in the ordinance. Under 40A, it says abutters and owners directly across the street. I think that's a little fraught, you know, because you're leaving it up to the applicant to decide who's directly across the street. Certainly abutters is the cleanest way to go. But if you wanted to add properties across the street, we would just say that.
I would support.
I would like that to be added. I really would, because.
Let's take up abutters of abutters, then we can take up directly across the street. Okay. All those in favor of adding abutters?
Why wouldn't that just be the same thing? I mean, can't we include that in the same question?
I think they're two separate questions, because right now, picture your house on one side of the street, you have the two houses next to you, and then the two houses next to them. Those are abutters of abutters. Across the street is going to be a slightly separate question.
And behind you, you have a butters behind you.
Behind too, yeah.
Sure, I was just distinguishing between the two. Okay, all those in favor of adding abutters to abutters, please say aye.
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 I've got 3. I've got Wright, Baker, and Ryan. Those opposed to adding abutters of abutters?
Aye.
No. I have 2, Noel and Krinsman,
Greenberg.
and Greenberg and Albright. Okay. 3 to 4. And is there an abstention?
I abstained just because we changed the methodology, so.
Okay. So that goes down. Support for adding directly across the street. Okay, all those in favor of adding directly across the street, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any
Me,
abstentions?
I'm opposed to that.
I oppose it as well, sorry. Any abstentions?
I'm
I-
abstaining.
Sorry, I opposed it as well. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
All right, let's start this again. Adding directly across the street. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I've got Wright, Ryan, Humphrey,
Baker.
Baker. 4. Those opposed?
Aye.
5.
Aye.
Noel, Albright, and Krinsman. Smart group. And abstentions?
Greenberg.
Greenberg. Okay, 4 to 3 to 1, that is added. That succeeds directly across the street, goes in. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Here we go.
Question.
Oh, good. Councilor Humphrey.
Sorry, I'm not trying to rehash this too much here, but despite notwithstanding the vote we just took, paths in Oak Hill Park has to be defined differently than a standard street. I understand that that is not found elsewhere in the city, but that has to be defined differently, because if it's interpreted as, oh, it's across the street, so it doesn't count, that is not consistent with the reality on the ground in Oak Hill Park if you go and look there.
It does count. We just voted to keep it in.
No,
We just voted to keep across the street was part of the notice.
what?
So I think that picks up Councilor Ryan's concern.
Did it not just fail?
No, we
There's a
added
whole bunch of
directly
votes.
across the street.
You all just voted the other way. What?
No,
No. we didn't.
4,
We
3, and
voted
1.
4, 3,
You
1.
won.
Okay.
You
All
gotta
right.
celebrate this victory, Councilor Humphrey. You just won.
Sure. Fine.
And congratulations. Okay. In section, sorry, anyone have anything else in 2183 or 2184? Hearing none.
Wait,
Moving
wait.
on to 2185, which is tree replacement. And in this section, we had added an exemption for cemeteries, accredited arboretum, yada, yada, yada. Folks remember. Councilor Wright, you have a proposal to replace the cemetery exemption, and I will allow you to explain it.
Yes. So if we allow the full exemption of level 2 arboretum, this is setting a precedent, since golf courses and college campuses can easily meet that very low bar for level 2 designation. So there's 2 ways I'd like to do it. Either is to require a level 4 arboretum status, and that does give a lot more protection, or to give credit. I did meet with the cemetery and that, and they do have a plan in there right now, but who's to say what it is a few years down. Give a credit for like 4 years previous and 2 years future of plannings of, to take into account what they plan to tear down. So they have kind of like a 6-year window. Uh-oh, I don't hear anything.
Sorry, I muted myself. The language currently allows for level 2, 3, or 4 arboretum. Councilor Wright wants to change that to level 4 only. And in the alternative, would like to change the requirements to a sort of one-time exemption to get credit for the previous 4 years and 2 future years of plantings. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
They could do either one.
Okay. Councilor Baker.
Can Councilor Wright clarify can the cemetery meet this level 4 standard now?
No.
No,
So my concern is that if you restrict it to level 4, you're basically going the second part, which is saying the 6-year interval, and I think I'm not in favor of that. So I would keep the current arrangement. I understand the concern about the colleges and golf courses, but if they can meet that standard, there is a replacement in the process, I think, that persuaded me that the cemeteries ought to be exempt for that reason, not just because of the cemetery, right? I mean, it's because they met the arboretum standard. But others may have more information. So that's my initial concern.
Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Wright, has there been an issue with burials happening on golf courses in Newton?
no, but they can decide, the change in.
To
change
become a
up their golf
cemetery?
course. No, but to change.
Well, we're
oh,
talking about cemeteries. It says cemetery in the language. It says cemetery right there. Come on.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Humphrey. Okay, let's take them one at a time. We'll take them
Never
one at a time. First, we'll talk about exclusively level 4 only, and then we'll talk about the second one. So, all those in favor of restricting the cemetery exemption to only level 4 arboretum, as opposed to level 2, 3, and 4, please say aye.
Aye.
That is 1. Those opposed? Aye.
Aye.
No. You're supposed to say no when you oppose. Come on.
Any sound is going to give me a vote for no, so don't worry. I can interpret it. I've interpreted people on mute tonight. Okay, I believe that was 6. Any abstentions? Okay, so it's 7. 1 to 7, that goes down.
We need to do a wellness check for Counselor Humphrey.
Well, I don't have your queso, so unless you're going to come over and bring me queso, I'm going to get cranky. I didn't have dinner.
The
Sorry,
other
everyone.
proposal from Councillor Wright was to, instead of the arboretum exemption and cemetery exemption, to give cemeteries credit for 4 previous years and 2 future years of planting for level 4. I'm guessing, Councillor Wright, you're okay now with saying 2, 3, and 4, since we just voted down the 4 only?
Well, I would go for 3, 3 or 4.
Propose whatever you want.
Um,
I'm talking about level arboretum.
So the level 2 arboretum basically says you just have to have a plan.
We just had that debate though. So what do you want to propose now in terms of credit before and after?
Oh, I went 4 years before and 2 years later credit.
Okay, but this is for anyone obtaining level 2 arboretum or beyond, right? Because we just took that vote and your original proposal was only for level 4 arboretum.
I mean, if it's not going to change the level 2, the level 2 is basically, they just need a plan. They don't have to, they're not accountable for replanting or tear downs or whatever. They just have to have a plan, which is, not a lot, doesn't say much. And now if they have a choice of counting 4 years behind and 2 years in front, or just have a plan, they're never going to do that 6-year window. So that's why I want to do the 6-year window to kind of give them an option, because a level 4 is a lot more difficult and a lot more goes into it, level 4 arboretum. So if they didn't want to go that far, so then they have the 6-year window to count, their trees, their plantings. But if you're still going to leave it at just level 2, I mean, it doesn't make much sense.
Okay, so you're removing this proposal?
Yeah.
Okay. President Albright?
So we don't have anything to vote on then, is that right?
Correct. The next thing coming up is incentivizing the planting of native species as replacement trees. You want to wait until then?
I'm all set. I just want to say that level 2 arboretum requires at least 100 woody species. So there are rules there. It's not just a plan.
Okay, Councillor Wright, you have proposed incentivizing the planting of native species as replacement trees in this section. Do you want to speak to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. What section is this? I have a lot.
2185B1.
Okay, just,
Feel like I'm playing.
I've been up since 4 a.m., so it's been a long day for me too.
I totally understand if you want to withdraw this motion. That's fine by me.
No, I don't want to withdraw
You're
it, but
tired. I get it.
Okay. So, I want to, prioritize planting native trees when replacing trees, because it's going to help with the biodiversity, and also with the climate change and coming up and stuff. I think it's really important, and not to go, I think right now they all kind of go to one tree, but just to have a variety, and native is the way to go. I mean, native should be in your garden too.
There's a question for Mr. Welch. Do we have an existing rule that says that you have to do native replacements of non-natives?
We do not have an existing rule that explicitly says that. Our current rules are, and as proposed, is replacements are the same or similar type of tree.
How are you defining or similar? Because I think this had come up in a previous meeting that you're not encouraging people to do replacements of a non-native with a non-native, but maybe I misunderstood that at the time.
So for us, the same or similar is typically, if it's for example, if a sugar maple is being cut down, that's a large maturing tree. We would expect that large maturing deciduous tree, we would expect the replacements to be large maturing deciduous trees. We don't make a distinction at this time about native or non-native.
Okay. I would agree with Councilor Wright that we should be incentivizing on the replacement end of things that these be native species. Thank you.
I don't see any other comments. Councilor Wright, did you have a specific idea about how to incentivize the planting? How did you want to do this?
No, I haven't. No, I don't. I don't
Just
know.
mandate that they're natives.
No.
Sorry, I would recommend that if you're gonna go this route, I mean, it has to just be a requirement. Either it's required to be.
Require that it be native.
Yeah, I've talked in other contexts about my disdain for language like we encourage people to, we think you ought to, even have nice friendly conversations with neighbors, though we do encourage that. It's tough to put it in the ordinance. Councilor Maliki.
Yeah, I just wanted to caution that there are different people have different standards for what is native. There's native to North America, there's native to this region, there's sort of Mark can remind me of the proper term, the basic species versus a cultivar. Some people, I think of cultivars as not native. And there's the issue of, well, to use two of my favorite trees, sweet gums and tulip trees, native to US, not technically native to this area, but they're kind of starting to pop up here, at least tulip tree seedlings, because the climate's getting warmer. So if you get into native versus non-native, you might be kind of introducing a level of complexity that you might not want to have to deal with. I think it's really important, as Mark Welch said, if they're removing large maturing deciduous trees, let's get large maturing deciduous trees as a replacement, not, little bitty smaller deciduous trees or so forth. So, if you wanted to encourage natives, you don't want the word encourage, that we've talked about that in zoning. It's not really binding. You might want 50% of the Californians to be native to North American species, or their cultivars or something like that. But that, as I said, introduces a level of complexity.
President Albright.
So I don't often agree with Councilor Maliki, but I'm 100% there tonight. But I have a question from Mark Welch. Mark, so if we were to say native trees, I mean, I don't know enough about growing trees to know whether that's sufficient for an arboretum or not. Or and as Councilor Maliki said, is it native to New England, native to North America? How would you interpret this issue?
So I think we're talking about all plantings, not just for an
Yeah, this is
arboretum.
all
correct?
replacement trees.
Yeah. So my interpretation of, for us, I consider a native tree, just as Councilor Maliki said, native to North America. I don't think, and it does add complexity, but some percent requirement be native replacement, a minimum. I think we could feel comfortable with that. I'd have to think about what that percentage is. But I do think that there's value there. I don't know that I'm not sure about, I'm not convinced incentivizing makes things really complicated. I think just requiring that a certain percentage is a native replacement, a minimum percentage is native trees. Because there could be an instance where it's just not appropriate. And that's, there are plenty of great trees that are not native to North America, that are not detrimental. They're not invasive. Like everyone, and I'll use an example. A lot of folks like a Japanese maple. They're super slow growing. They are not generally considered an invasive, at least not to my knowledge. And maybe there's a specific instance where that would be a valuable tree someone would like to plant as part of their landscape. That's perfectly acceptable from my perspective. But replacing a whole bunch of red oak trees with a Japanese maple, that's a completely different type of tree, different structure, and that's not something that that wouldn't even be count the same or similar.
So would you think that a certain percentage would be a reasonable request or a reasonable ordinance?
I think a certain percentage would be reasonable. I just don't, sitting here tonight, I can't tell you if that's 50%, 60%, 80%. I don't know. I'd have to think through that one a little bit.
Okay. So maybe we ask Mr. Welch to think about that and come back to us with a proposal.
Mr. Humphrey?
Thank you. I'd like to specify Eastern region under the U.S. Forest Service regions.
Councilor Ray?
Well, because with climate change and that, I mean, what's eastern right now today, things farther south might, especially when you're looking 50, 100 years down the line, is you might want something farther south and not just the eastern area. Maybe a tree from South Carolina. If you're doing, long-term planning, and I'm okay, instead of incentivize, keep, replace with, similar like, and maybe 50% native, and at least that'll be a starting point, and then people will actually think about it, and hopefully they'll think, oh, maybe I should do more than 50% native.
So I'll weigh in. I'll just say that the language right now says that replacement trees shall be of the same or similar species or such other species as deemed advisable by the tree warden. I think that's a pretty healthy level of discretion, as well as a mandate that, especially for bigger trees that we're talking about, I'm going to have to assume that if they've been here 100 years, that's a native species, and the replacement's going to be the same or similar. So I think we are getting overly prescriptive here, much more so than an ordinance needs to be. And I think the language that exists in there essentially covers this issue as much as the city council in 2023 should for a replacement tree 20 years from now. But that's just my opinion, obviously. And so I'll let Councilors Baker and Norton chastise me. Councilor Baker?
There you go. I'm disposed to agree with you just because, what is becoming an appropriate tree is something that I think is a difficult question. And so I would, I'm open to persuasion, but I'd rather leave it the way it is.
Thank you. Councilor Norton.
I agree with you as well. And I just want to make a comment that I'm not usually in this committee, but the other committees I'm in, there is less jocularity and teasing or disrespect to each other. So I just wanted to make that comment. It's very jarring coming to this committee and seeing this. So I agree with you. We have a great tree warden, and I think we should leave it to his discretion.
I'm sorry, were you saying that we are disrespecting each other here in this committee? Or
I
we do
am.
less of that?
I am saying that.
Okay, I haven't seen that. And I think this committee is very respectful of one another. And I think this committee is exemplary in the way we debate and work through issues. So on behalf of
Sharing
my
my
team
opinion, you
members,
can
I
disagree. I'm
disagree with you.
just giving an observation.
Okay, I disagree with your observation. And I don't think I've seen that from any of my committee members, nor have I disrespected anyone.
So
Okay.
I'll withdraw my recommendation or amendment.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like there's support unless Councillor Humphrey wants me to keep it.
I agree that there's not enough support at this time. Maybe we come back to it in the next term when we have more time to work on exactly pinning down native definitions and invasives versus non-invasives.
Okay, the next thing I have on my list was 2186, which was to allow the residents with a fixed or low income. I think we already addressed that. Right, Councilor Wright? Okay. Anyone else have anything within the ordinances that they see needing to be revisited? And then we have two more questions from Councilor Wright. Okay. Councilor Wright has asked, how will the Urban Forestry Division keep track of construction up to 2 years after tree removal when, quote, no construction is planned? I think we've talked about that a little bit tonight with the permitting system, but Mr. Welch, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we have mentioned it. So all tree removal, even if it's on the 1 and 2 family lots where there's no construction, therefore no replacement, will need to require, they'll get some form of a permit from us. That will go into the new gov, that will go into the new gov system. Once it's in the new gov system, if someone comes to us in 2 years, in that 2-year time period for a building permit, we'll see it right there in front of us. It'll be flagged, it'll be listed in the permit. So that's something we will review for prior to issuing a permit that for approving the construction project.
But if they don't do any work in the 2 years, will the new gov system say, oh, they didn't do the construction, and will they have to pay for taking down those trees?
Well, I don't know if I understand. So if they don't do construction in those 2-year time period, then they don't need to replace the trees.
Okay, yep.
Malachi?
I'm sorry, that was a leftover hand.
Okay. Okay, then the other question was, would new owners be responsible for fees / replacement for trees that were cut and not replaced in the 2 years before they purchased the house? I think we talked about this as well, but do you have more questions, Councilor Wright? I don't want to cut it off.
Yeah, it was more about, I was worried, that 2 year in a lookout and they sell the house, and not to a developer, but to a family. And are they responsible now for the money for the tree permits or not?
And I think the understanding, at least from my perspective, is that they are, that the look back goes.
Yeah, that's how we see
years
it.
after they've taken over the property.
Okay.
That is correct. That's how it is written now.
Okay. Will they get a bill from the city for this, or how will they find out that they owe this money?
So if
So they'll be the ones applying for the tree removal, and they'll just find it, right?
yeah, so they would be required to then, so as we do it now, they would be required to comply with the tree ordinance. We would tell them that X number of trees were cut less than 2 years time period. You need to mitigate these removals. And here, at that point, they can choose to plant or pay or a combination.
Okay.
And it's part of their permitting process for their construction.
Yeah.
But if they, okay.
Chair, I did have 2 provisions that I wanted to circle back on if now's the time for that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one of them is it's under E conditions in 2183. And I just was looking for some clarification from the committee. So this provision talks about, it starts, the paragraph that starts no exterior work for folks who have it up in front of them. It talks about a process where the tree permit holder has to provide documentation to the tree warden that all protective measures are in place, and then the tree warden will provide written documentation back to the property owner that the exterior work may commence. To me, this sounds like a whole secondary, essentially permit and approval process where a second permit will have to be issued before the work. That raises confusion for me from a drafting perspective, but also administrative concerns. I would strongly recommend crafting this just so there is more discretion to Mark, so that to ensure that people are complying with their permits before work commences.
Does anyone have any concern about that in terms of drafting or questions? As Jonas laid it out, it makes sense to me. Okay.
Okay, next
What's the
one
other
is
issue, Jonah? Yep.
Yeah, that's good. The only other one is the appeal provision in, I think it's the same section we were in, but H. It sounds like everyone on the committee is on the same page that abutters do not have a right of appeal. So I would recommend clarifying, rather than saying any person aggrieved by a decision of the tree warden may file an appeal, to say any applicant aggrieved by a decision of the tree warden may file an appeal.
And that would correct the existing language, right?
Yes.
I have a question about that.
Councilor Baker.
Is that in the current ordinance?
Say that again.
The current ordinance, yeah, the current ordinance is any person aggrieved.
It is, but it's never been interpreted or applied as a true appeal provision in the past. I don't think there's ever been, an abutter appeal. Or frankly, any appeal.
Well, I guess, if that's the case, I don't see any harm in leaving it there. But I do think that there's, the question of party aggrieved. I guess I would leave it in, but that's just not, that's late and my leads are about to drop, but what is it?
Councilor Maliki.
Yes, so that provision is in the current ordinance. So if you take it out, you are weakening the current ordinance for no good reason. I am aware of only one case of somebody other than the petitioner applicant filing an appeal, and that was on Pinecrest Road with the developer of the parcels behind Whole Foods was going to cut down a whole mess of trees. The abutters filed an appeal. It led to the applicant withdrawing their application and tree permit application and talking to the abutters, and they came to an agreement that saved a lot of trees that would otherwise have been cut down. So you really need to keep this in, because the abutters are the ones who can be affected. For example, if there's, as was mentioned, the the water in the basement issue, they might be downhill from a whole lot of trees being cut and at risk for landslide type events. So if you take this out, you're saying you don't want a protection that we've had for, I think it's like 14 years.
But Counselor, those are not issues that would ever be addressed on an appeal. An appeal would absolutely be limited to, did Mark properly interpret and apply the ordinance? Those issues you said, those are private issues. If you are causing damage to your neighbor by something you're doing on your property, then they have rights against you. That I would strongly urge the city not to open this up to abutter appeals. It would while it is not, while the existing language is what it says now, it would be a significant shift in how tree appeals are handled in the city.
We've been living with the current language for, I think it's 14 or so years, and it has not been a problem. So you seem to be reading into it things that we have not read into it before, that it was limited to properly issued or not properly issued. It
Well,
says
I
any
would
person
just
moved
say,
by
in-
the decision of the tree warden can appeal. The appeal goes to the mayor. Now, it's probably highly unlikely, that an appeal would be successful, but they have the right to do it. And it can have beneficial outcomes, as I noted in the Pinecrest Road situation.
just one follow-up on that. We are now changing the ordinance so that 1 and 2 family homes are within it. And we are now giving a butter notification. So I would foresee a significant uptick in appeals.
Can we vote?
Thank you, President Albright.
Sorry, I was just going to say exactly what Mr. Temple just said. So it would give people the impression that they have more rights than they really have.
So we have a proposal to change any person aggrieved to a petitioner in terms of the rights of appeal. So it would go from any person aggrieved to saying a petitioner aggrieved by a decision. All those in favor of making that change, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I have 3. Princeman, Humphrey, Albright.
Greenberg.
Greenberg, 4. Those opposed,
No.
No.
that was Wright, Baker. Was there a third? Okay, abstentions?
Yes, I'm abstaining.
Ryan abstains. Councilor Noel, are you still here? Okay, so 4 to 2 to 1, that change is made
Are we done?
to petitioner. I do not have any other issues on my list. Anyone have any other issues? Okay, then the plan is at a future meeting, as soon as the law department is able to draft this and we're able to review that language, not to necessarily revisit any of these issues. I would hope not. We would at that point just be reviewing to see that the language reflects the decisions made by the committee accurately, especially those that we haven't seen language on. I think law is interested in possibly redrafting some of the amendment, some of the ordinance, not based on the changes that we've made, but to sort of clean it up and make it read a little bit better, smoother. So we can anticipate some of that as well. But as is, I think, a very advisable process, we will get to review all that language prior to finalizing our recommendation, but all that language would be comprised within the recommendation that we as a committee make to the full council. But we'll do that at a future meeting. Councilor Maliki?
I just wanted to clarify, did you just eliminate the right for an abutter to appeal on the basis that a permit was improperly issued?
Yes.
Did an abutter ever have a right to appeal on the basis that a permit was improperly issued?
Well, that's what you just said, that they had, that's what,
I thought Jody said it was ambiguous and it wasn't being used that way.
But it could be, and it seems like you've just eliminated the right. We don't think Mark is going to improperly decide, but who knows what will happen with a future tree warden.
Well, I mean, anybody who feels like the ordinance was improperly interpreted can go to court on that, just like any other ordinance in the city. It's not like there's no recourse.
Going to court is not practical for most people. It needs hiring a lawyer. I'm appalled that you would say that's a reasonable alternative. Then are we going to abandon all effort to enforce our own ordinances? Is it going to be up to individuals to hire a lawyer and go to court if they think an ordinance is not being properly enforced?
We voted on this.
There's
Can we
also a
move
lot
on?
of difficulty in creating an internal appeal process for every single ordinance.
Folks, I'm ready to guess.
We did take a vote on this. We are moving on. So the process is to review all the language. Again, hopefully we're just looking to see that the language actually and accurately reflects the decisions that we as a committee have made. Would someone like to move hold?
Move hold.
Councilor Humphrey has moved hold on both items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The items will be held. That is all we have for tonight. 10 o'clock, 10:05. Thank you all very much. Very productive. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.